first voice beneath the cabin floor sounded exactly like my best friend. It whispered my name, told me to open the door, and said it had found something in the dark. The problem was that my friend was standing beside me, staring at the floor. That was when we realized someone had been living beneath us. Before this story begins, look toward the nearest door or window, and ask yourself how certain you are that no one has ever watched you through it. Comment below and tell me what city, state, or country you are watching from tonight. If you have experienced a real unexplained incident, write it in the comments because your story may be included in our next video. Like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy true-style horror stories that become more disturbing the deeper they go. My name is Ethan, and everything started when my friends Owen, Mara, and I rented an isolated fire lookout cabin in the mountains. We wanted silence, privacy, and a few nights away from ordinary life. Instead, we found a man watching the property, a hidden camera on the trail, and a wooden chair beneath the cabin floor. That night, the power failed. Someone entered the correct door code. Someone moved under the floorboards. Then a voice outside copied Owen perfectly and called my name. Police found food, batteries, sleeping supplies, cameras, and a notebook describing every guest who had stayed there. Our entry ended with 4 words: wait until they drink. The man escaped, but the story did not end at the mountain. He followed us home through stolen voices, hidden speakers, fake calls, underground tunnels, and numbered doors. We learned the name Aaron Vale, but later discovered Aaron was not just one man. It was a role passed between watchers, criminals, blackmailed officials, and people who controlled each new cabin. Every clue pulled us deeper. Station 17, Door 18, the desert facility, the hidden archive beneath my childhood home. At the center of it all was Door 0, where decades of disappearances, surveillance, and murder were finally exposed. But Aaron understood our greatest weakness. We needed answers, and every answer opened another door. So listen carefully tonight. If you hear 3 knocks from somewhere inside your wall, do not answer. Because by the time you hear the sound, the person watching you may already be inside beside you. The first time the voice came from beneath the cabin floor, it sounded exactly like my best friend Owen. It used his tired voice, his exact rhythm, and even the strange way he stretched out the last word whenever he wanted me to hurry. Ethan, the voice whispered from under the bedroom. Come down here. I found something. I was about to answer when Owen grabbed my shoulder from behind me. Before I tell you why that moment still keeps me awake, take a second to look toward the nearest window or doorway around you. Then comment below and tell me what city or state you are listening from tonight. I always read those comments because after what happened in that cabin, I became curious about how darkness feels in different parts of the country. Share this story with a friend who is always trying to plan a remote cabin trip. And if you enjoy true-style horror stories that become more disturbing the longer they continue, like the video and subscribe. You are going to want to hear this one all the way to the end, because the voice under the floor was not the beginning of what happened to us. By the time it spoke, someone had already been watching our cabin for nearly 9 hours. My name is Ethan, and this happened during the last week of September in 2022. I was 27 years old at the time and living in a small apartment outside Columbus, Ohio. I worked remotely for an insurance company, which meant I spent most of my days alone, staring at claim forms on 2 computer monitors. Nothing exciting ever happened to me. My life had become predictable in a way that felt comfortable at first and suffocating later. I woke up, made coffee, answered emails, reviewed documents, ordered food, watched television, and went to bed. By the end of that summer, I wanted to go somewhere where I could not hear traffic, notifications, or the upstairs neighbor dragging furniture across his floor 2 in the morning. My closest friends were Owen and Mara. Owen and I had met during our first year of college. He was tall, loud, constantly hungry, and unable to enter a room without immediately checking whether there was anything to eat. He could make conversation with almost anyone, although he usually regretted it afterward. Mara had joined our friend group a few years later. She was quieter than Owen, but far more observant. She carried a camera almost everywhere and had the unsettling ability to notice small details everyone else missed. She would remember the color of a stranger's shoes or the position of a car parked across the street hours after the rest of us had forgotten the person existed. The three of us had talked about taking a trip together for years. We always found a reason to postpone it. Someone had work, someone had family plans, and someone was short on money. Eventually, Mara found a rental listing for an old forestry cabin in the mountains of western Pennsylvania. The property had once housed workers responsible for watching the surrounding forest for fires. An old lookout tower still stood beside the cabin, although the listing warned that visitors were not allowed to climb it. The photographs showed a simple wooden building surrounded by pine trees. Fog hung between the branches, and behind the cabin, the rusted steel tower disappeared into the clouds. The place looked isolated without appearing completely abandoned. It had electricity, running water, 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a wood-burning stove. There were no nearby houses. There was no internet connection. Cell service was described as unreliable. Mara sent us the listing with only 3 words: "We need this." The summer tourist season had ended, so the cabin was cheap. We booked it for 3 nights and planned to spend our days hiking, taking pictures, cooking over a fire, and doing absolutely nothing productive. The owner sent us detailed instructions 2 days before the trip. We were supposed to leave the main highway near a town called Bellwether, follow a county road for 12 miles, and turn onto an unmarked gravel road beside an abandoned gas station. The gravel road continued for about 6 miles before narrowing into a rough mountain access trail. The owner warned us not to attempt the drive in a small car. Owen owned an old 4-wheel drive Jeep, so we planned to take that. The instructions also included a code for the electronic front door lock, directions for starting the water pump, and a warning about the generator. If the electricity failed, we were told not to attempt to repair the generator ourselves. We were supposed to contact the owner through an emergency satellite messenger stored beside the refrigerator. At the bottom of the message, the owner had added one final note: "You may occasionally see forestry workers inspecting the tower or water system. They will not need access to the cabin." None of us paid much attention to that sentence. We left Columbus shortly after 6 in the morning. The first few hours were completely normal. Owen complained about the music. Mara photographed barns and abandoned buildings through the passenger window. I drank too much gas station coffee and repeatedly promised I would stop at the next rest area. By early afternoon, the roads had narrowed. Houses became less frequent. Cell service disappeared 1 bar at a time until all 3 of our phones showed the same empty signal symbol. Bellwether was smaller than we expected. It had a post office, a diner, a hardware store, and a white church with a handwritten sign advertising a community dinner. We stopped at the diner because Owen insisted he would not survive another hour without food. There were only a few people inside. An older woman stood behind the counter. Her name tag said Carol. She was probably in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She was friendly until we mentioned where we were staying. "The old Miller Ridge cabin?" she asked. Mara nodded and told her it was the one beside the fire tower. Carol looked toward a man drinking coffee at the far end of the counter. He did not look back at her, but I had the impression that he was listening. "That road gets rough after rain," she said. "You have a proper vehicle?" Owen pointed through the window toward the Jeep. Carol nodded slowly. "Keep your food locked up. Bears have been active." We told her we would. She continued looking at us as though there was something else she wanted to say. Instead, she gathered our plates and disappeared into the kitchen. The man at the end of the counter remained seated. He wore a faded green work jacket and a dark baseball cap. The brim covered his eyes, so I could not see his face clearly. His coffee cup was empty, but he made no effort to leave. As we walked out, he turned slightly and watched us through the window. I remember that, because Mara mentioned it once we were back in the Jeep. "Your new friend is staring at us," she told Owen. Owen checked the rearview mirror and said people were naturally drawn to him. I told him mosquitoes were also drawn to standing water. We laughed and drove away. About 15 minutes outside Bellwether, we found the abandoned gas station described in the directions. Its windows had been covered with plywood, and weeds grew through long cracks in the concrete parking lot. An old price sign leaned toward the road, but all the plastic numbers were missing. The gravel road beside the station was easy to miss. There was no sign, only 2 pale tire tracks disappearing between the trees. The first few miles were manageable. Then the road began climbing. Loose stones struck the underside of the Jeep. Branches scraped along the doors and windows. In several places, the road narrowed so severely that I could look through my window and see the mountain dropping sharply into the trees below. There were no guardrails, no turnarounds, and no houses. After about 40 minutes, we reached a metal gate standing open across the road. A weathered sign beside it read, "Miller Ridge Fire Access. Authorized vehicles only. Proceed at your own risk." The rental owner had told us the gate would remain open during our booking, so we continued. A mile beyond the gate, we came across a white utility truck, parked diagonally across the road. A man stood beside it wearing a bright yellow safety vest. He lifted one hand and motioned for Owen to stop. Owen slowed the Jeep and muttered that this was probably going to cost us money. The man approached the driver's side window. He looked to be in his late 40s or early 50s. His beard was gray around the chin, and deep lines ran from his nose to the corners of his mouth. He wore muddy work boots and a dark baseball cap without any company name or logo. "Good afternoon," he said. Owen lowered the window and asked whether everything was okay. The man leaned slightly toward the Jeep, looking past Owen at Mara and me. "Checking the water lines," he said. "You staying at the lookout cabin?" Owen said yes. The man asked how many nights. The question felt strangely direct, but Owen answered before either of us could react. 3 nights. The man nodded. 3 people. Mara leaned forward from the back seat and asked whether there was a problem. He said there was no problem. He just needed to know whether the pump had been drawing properly. Then he stepped away and pointed up the road. "The cabin is about another mile. The ground gets soft near the top, so keep to the left." Owen thanked him. As we drove around the truck, I turned and looked through the rear window. The man remained in the middle of the road, watching us climb. His truck had no company name, forestry emblem, government plate, or safety markings. It was simply a dirty white pickup with a metal toolbox mounted behind the cab. I noticed something else. There were no hoses, pipes, tools, or equipment anywhere around him. There was only the truck and the yellow vest. Owen said the guy seemed friendly. Mara asked why the number of guests would matter to a water line. Owen said maybe the mountain charged by the flush. We laughed again, but the laughter felt less natural than it had at the diner. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees. It was larger than it looked in the listing photos, raised about 3 feet above the ground on concrete supports. A wooden porch ran across the front. Behind the cabin, the old fire tower climbed above the treetops. The tower was probably 80 feet tall. Its steel beams were covered with rust, and the lower ladder had been enclosed by a metal cage secured with a heavy padlock. The cabin itself looked well maintained. The roof appeared new, the windows were clean, and bundles of firewood had been stacked beneath a tarp beside the porch. There was only one obvious problem. The front door was standing open. Owen parked the Jeep beside the porch and shut off the engine. For several seconds, none of us moved. Mara asked whether the owner had said the door would be open. I reminded them that we had been given a code. Owen looked toward the trees and suggested that the maintenance worker might be inside. The cabin remained silent. I called out from the Jeep, asking whether anyone was there. No one answered. Owen reached beneath the driver's seat and pulled out a small tire iron. I asked him when he had started carrying it. He said approximately 10 seconds earlier. We approached the porch together. The front door had not been forced. It rested open by only a few inches, as though someone had entered and forgotten to close it properly. Owen pushed it inward with the tire iron. The main room contained a wooden table, a worn sofa, a small kitchen, and the wood-burning stove. 2 doors opened into separate bedrooms. Another narrow door led to the bathroom. Everything appeared clean and orderly. No one was inside. Mara checked the bathroom, while Owen looked beneath the beds and behind the bedroom doors. I remained near the entrance, watching the porch and the trees beyond it. There were no bags, tools, muddy footprints, or signs that anything had been disturbed. The electronic lock beeped when Owen tested it. The bolt worked normally. He said the cleaner had probably forgotten to pull the door shut. We carried our bags inside, and within half an hour, the open door had become a minor detail. The cabin felt peaceful during daylight. Sunlight filtered through the pine trees. A cool wind moved across the roof. From the porch, we could see several miles of forest-covered mountains, with the leaves beginning to turn red and gold. Mara unpacked her camera equipment. Owen opened every cupboard in the kitchen, searching for snacks. I found the orange emergency satellite messenger beside the refrigerator and placed it on the counter where we could reach it easily. The device looked like a thick cell phone with only a few buttons. A laminated card explained how to contact the property owner or emergency services. Around 4 in the afternoon, Mara and I walked around the outside of the cabin while Owen struggled to start a fire in the stove. The ground behind the building sloped upward toward the tower. Beneath the cabin was a dark crawl space, partially enclosed by wooden lattice. Pipes, electrical cables, and support beams disappeared into the shadows below the floor. One section of the lattice near the back had come loose. It leaned outward enough to create an opening about 2 feet wide. Mara crouched and aimed her camera into it. I asked whether she saw anything living under there. She took a picture with the flash and said she could only see pipes. I looked over her shoulder at the camera screen. The flash had illuminated bare dirt, several concrete pillars, and black plastic water lines. There was also an old wooden chair. It stood upright beneath the center of the cabin. I asked why anyone would leave a chair under there. Mara enlarged the photograph. The chair faced toward the pipes and electrical equipment. She said maybe someone sat there while making repairs. I asked whether she would sit beneath the cabin to fix a pipe. She said she would not. We called Owen outside. He looked at the photograph and then at the dark opening. He said the maintenance worker had probably left the chair there. The explanation was reasonable enough, although we still pushed the loose lattice back into place and leaned a heavy piece of firewood against it. We spent the remaining daylight exploring the area around the tower. A narrow trail started behind the cabin and descended toward an old water tank several hundred yards away. Another path followed the ridge through the trees. Small orange ribbons had been tied to branches at irregular intervals, probably marking a boundary or maintenance route. We followed the ridge trail for about 20 minutes. That was where Mara found the first camera. It was attached to a pine tree at chest height and pointed toward the trail. The device was small, painted dark brown, and partially hidden behind a strip of bark. Owen said at least someone was monitoring the wildlife. Mara examined it without touching it and said it was not a normal trail camera. Owen asked how she knew. She said the lens was too small and there was no visible motion sensor panel. A thin black wire ran from the device around the tree and disappeared beneath the leaves. We followed it for several feet before it vanished underground. I suggested that it might be forestry equipment. Mara said maybe, but she did not sound convinced. The camera was pointed directly along the trail toward the cabin. We continued walking, but the discovery changed the way the forest felt. Every tree seemed capable of hiding another lens. Every patch of dark bark looked like the front of a camera. We turned back before sunset. When the cabin came into view, Owen stopped walking. Someone was standing on the porch. The figure wore a yellow safety vest. It was the man from the road. He stood beside the front door with one hand raised toward the electronic keypad. Owen shouted at him. The man turned. For a moment, none of us moved. Then he stepped away from the door and said he was checking the water pump. We approached slowly. Owen told him he thought he had been checking the water line farther down the road. The man said the pressure was low. His eyes moved toward Mara's camera and then toward the trail behind us. He asked, "Got turned around up there?" I said we were not planning to hike at night. He nodded. He had removed the yellow vest and folded it over one arm. Beneath it, he wore a faded green jacket. It looked exactly like the jacket worn by the man in the diner. I was almost certain it was the same person. But when I tried to remember the diner customer's face, I realized I had never seen it clearly. I asked whether he had opened the cabin before we arrived. His expression did not change. He asked whether the door had been open. I said yes. He blamed the cleaner. Mara asked how he knew our door code. He looked toward the keypad. He said he did not know it. Mara told him he had been touching the buttons. He said he was checking whether the keypad still had power. The answer came immediately, as though he had prepared it. Owen stepped onto the porch, placing himself between the man and the door. He asked whether there was anything else he needed. The man studied him for several seconds. Then he said no. He put the yellow vest back on and told us the generator might shut down during the night because the weather was changing. The sky above us was clear, and there had been no rain in the forecast. The man walked past us without another word and disappeared down the road. We listened for his truck. No engine started. No door closed. The mountain remained completely silent. Mara asked whether he had walked to the cabin. Owen moved to the edge of the road and looked downhill. The white truck was nowhere in sight. He suggested that the man might have parked near the water tank. I reminded him that the tank was in the opposite direction. We went inside and locked the door. Owen searched the cabin more carefully. He opened the cupboards, checked beneath the beds again, and tested every window latch. Mara contacted the owner using the satellite messenger. She typed a message asking whether a man in a yellow vest was supposed to be inspecting the water system. The device showed a small rotating symbol while the message transmitted. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No reply came. The sun disappeared behind the ridge, and darkness arrived quickly beneath the trees. We closed the curtains and switched on every light in the cabin. Owen started the wood stove, filling the main room with a dry, comfortable heat. For dinner, we made pasta and heated a jar of sauce. None of us mentioned the man while we ate. Around 8 o'clock, the satellite messenger beeped. Mara grabbed it. The owner's response contained only 2 sentences. No contractors are scheduled this week. Do not let anyone inside. The 3 of us stared at the message. Owen said we should leave immediately. I agreed. Mara looked toward the windows and asked whether we really wanted to drive down that road in complete darkness. Owen reminded her that the Jeep had headlights. She asked what would happen if the man blocked the road with his truck. That possibility silenced us. The route down the mountain included several steep sections and almost no room to turn around. If the white utility truck was parked sideways across the road, we would be trapped inside the Jeep with nowhere to go. We messaged the owner again and explained that the man had been at the cabin. We asked whether we should contact the police. The owner responded quickly. Yes, use the emergency option. Give them the coordinates on the card. The satellite messenger did not allow a normal voice call, but it could send text messages to emergency services. Mara followed the instructions. The operator told us that a sheriff's deputy would be sent to the cabin. Because of our location and the condition of the road, the estimated arrival time was between 45 minutes and 1 hour. We locked all the windows. Owen pushed the kitchen table against the front door. I found an iron fireplace poker beside the stove. Mara picked up the heavy flashlight from her camera bag. We agreed that none of us would go outside. At about 8:30, something struck the roof. It was a small, hard impact. We all looked upward. A second object rolled down the metal roof and dropped onto the ground outside. Owen said it was probably a pine cone. Another impact followed. then another. Each one landed near the same section of roof above the rear bedroom. Mara whispered that they were not falling naturally. The objects stopped. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then we heard a whistle from somewhere among the trees. It consisted of 2 short notes, followed by 1 longer note. Owen moved toward the curtain, but Mara grabbed his arm and told him not to look. The whistle came again, farther to the left. 2 short notes and 1 long note. The sound was not loud. It did not need to be. The forest was so quiet that the whistle seemed to pass directly through the walls. I pictured the man moving between the trees, testing whether we would react. We kept the curtains closed. At 8:47, the electricity went out. Every light disappeared at once. The refrigerator stopped humming. The cabin dropped into complete darkness. Mara switched on her flashlight. I reached for the satellite messenger, afraid that the power failure had somehow affected it. The device still worked. Owen read the laminated instructions and said the generator was located in a small shed behind the cabin. I told him no one was going outside. He said he had not been volunteering. The wood stove continued to provide heat, but the sudden absence of electrical noise made the cabin feel exposed. Every movement inside became clear. Fabric brushed against fabric. Floorboards creaked beneath our weight. We could hear one another breathing. The wind had stopped completely. The satellite device beeped. The deputy had reached the gravel access road. The operator estimated another 30 minutes before he arrived. Mara wrote that someone might be outside the cabin and that we had lost electricity. The operator instructed us to remain inside and avoid confronting anyone. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then someone walked across the porch. The boards creaked beneath slow, deliberate steps. 1 step, then another, then another. The person stopped outside the front door. The electronic keypad beeped. Someone pressed 1 number, then another, then another. The lock operated on its own battery, so it still worked, even though the cabin had lost power. The person outside entered 4 digits. The keypad gave a sharp error tone. Several seconds passed. Another combination was entered. Another error. Owen and I moved the sofa against the table, adding more weight behind the door. The keypad beeped again. This time, the person entered the correct code. The motor inside the lock turned. The bolt slid open. The door handle moved downward. The door pressed against the table. None of us breathed. The person outside pushed harder. The table legs scraped across the floor before the sofa stopped them. The handle slowly returned to its original position. For several seconds, the stranger remained on the porch. Then a man spoke through the door. He told us to move the table. It was the man in the yellow vest. Owen tightened his grip around the tire iron and shouted that the police were coming. The man remained silent. Then he said the generator had failed and he needed to check the electrical panel. Owen told him he did not work for the owner. Another silence followed. Then the man spoke more softly. He said we should not have contacted the owner. A cold pressure spread through my chest. He knew we had sent messages. That meant he was guessing he had somehow intercepted our communication, or he had been close enough to watch us through the windows. Owen told him to leave. The man gave a single quiet laugh. Then his footsteps moved away from the door. We expected him to walk down the porch steps. Instead, the sound continued around the side of the cabin. The boards beneath our feet creaked. At first, I thought the noise came from part of the porch wrapping around the wall. Then, something scraped beneath the floor. The crawl space. We all remembered the loose section of lattice and the wooden chair. Owen moved toward the center of the room and looked down. A faint impact came from directly beneath his feet. 3 slow knocks. The first knock came from beneath the living room. The second came from beneath the kitchen. The third came from somewhere under the rear bedroom. Owen stepped backward. The man was crawling beneath us. Mara covered her mouth with one hand. The satellite messenger beeped. In the silent cabin, the sound was painfully loud. A new message said the deputy was about 20 minutes away and reminded us to remain inside. Before Mara could respond, the floor beneath the kitchen shifted. A rectangular section of the linoleum lifted slightly and dropped back down. There was a hatch in the floor. We had not noticed it earlier because its edges had been hidden beneath a small rug and the kitchen table we had moved against the front door. The rug had now been pushed aside from underneath. The hatch lifted again. Owen and I rushed toward it. We pulled a narrow kitchen cabinet over the panel. Then we stacked 2 boxes of firewood on top of the cabinet. Something pressed upward from below. The cabinet moved. Mara aimed the flashlight toward the floor and shouted that the police knew where we were. The pressure stopped. For several seconds, there was no sound beneath us. Then the man spoke through the floor. His voice was muffled by the wood, but we understood every word. 3 people, he said. 1 vehicle. He had been repeating the information he collected when he stopped us on the road. Owen raised the tire iron and struck the floor above the voice. The impact echoed through the cabin. Something moved quickly beneath us. The wooden chair fell over in the crawl space. Then we heard a person crawling through dirt and dry leaves. A few seconds later, the loose lattice at the rear of the cabin snapped outward. The stranger had escaped from underneath the building. We heard him move into the trees. The 3 of us remained gathered around the floor hatch, listening. A minute passed. Then 5. No headlights appeared on the road. No siren approached. The deputy's estimated arrival time changed from 15 minutes to 12. Owen refused to move away from the hatch. Mara watched the windows. I held the satellite messenger and tried to keep my hands from shaking. That was when a voice whispered outside the rear bedroom. "Ethan." I froze. The voice sounded exactly like Owen, not similar to him, not close to him. It was his voice. "Ethan," it whispered again. "Come outside. I found something." I turned toward Owen. He stood only a few feet away beside the kitchen, staring at me. Mara's face had gone pale. The voice outside repeated my name. Owen lowered the tire iron and asked how the man was doing that. Then I remembered something from earlier. During our walk along the ridge, Owen had complained about the cold and recorded a short video on Mara's small action camera. He had jokingly called out to me and said he had found something. The stranger had not learned Owen's voice. He had recorded it, or he had somehow taken audio from the camera. I whispered to Mara that she should check her equipment. She looked toward the table where she had placed her camera bag. Her large camera was there. The smaller action camera was missing. She searched the bag. Then she remembered leaving it charging beside the bedroom window. The camera was gone. The window remained locked, but the charging cable had been pulled beneath the curtain. Mara opened the curtain less than an inch and aimed the flashlight at the windowsill. The window was still closed. The screen had been cut near the bottom corner. A narrow hand could have reached through the opening and taken the small camera from the sill. The voice played again. "Ethan, come outside." This time, the words sounded slightly distorted, as though they were coming from a cheap speaker. The stranger was using the recording to lure one of us out. We did not answer. The voice stopped. Then it came from the opposite side of the cabin. "Ethan." He was moving around us, or he had placed more than one speaker outside. The front door handle shifted gently. It was not a forceful attempt. It was only a quiet test. Owen pointed toward the floor hatch and asked what would happen if the man came back underneath. We added more weight on top of it. The cabin had 2 bedrooms, but only 1 exterior door. The windows were narrow and several feet above the ground. Even if we broke one and climbed out, the stranger could be waiting directly beneath it. Our safest option was to remain inside until the deputy arrived. At least that was what we believed. A beam of light appeared through the curtains. It moved between the trees and across the front wall. For 1 second, I thought it was a vehicle. Then Mara grabbed my arm. The light was not approaching from the road. It came from behind the cabin, where no vehicle could drive. It was a flashlight. Someone outside shouted that he was from the sheriff's department. Owen stepped toward the door. Mara blocked him and told him to wait. The voice shouted again, asking whether everyone was inside. It sounded convincing. We had been told one deputy was coming, but we had not been given his name or vehicle description. The flashlight beam crossed the window. The man outside told us to come to the door. I looked at the satellite messenger. No message confirming the deputy's arrival had appeared. The device still showed that he was several minutes away. Mara whispered that it was the stranger. The person outside knocked loudly, and again announced that he was from the sheriff's department. Owen shouted through the door and asked for his name. The answer came after a pause. Deputy Collins. Owen told him to contact us through dispatch. Silence followed. Then the stranger struck the door so violently that the table jumped backward. Mara screamed. Another impact shook the frame. The man had abandoned the imitation and was throwing his shoulder against the door. The table slid. The sofa moved several inches. Owen and I pushed against it from inside. The stranger struck the door again. The wood cracked near the lock. The electronic bolt held, but the frame was beginning to split. Mara typed into the satellite messenger that the man was breaking through the door. Another impact sent part of the trim falling onto the floor. Then, somewhere far below the ridge, we heard a real siren. The stranger stopped. All three of us remained pressed against the furniture. The siren grew louder. Headlights appeared between the trees on the access road. This time, we could hear an engine climbing the mountain. The man outside ran from the porch. Branches snapped beside the cabin. A flashlight beam disappeared into the forest. Seconds later, a dark figure crossed behind the jeep. He no longer wore the yellow safety vest. He wore only the faded green jacket and dark baseball cap. He moved quickly toward the ridge trail and vanished among the trees before the patrol vehicle reached the clearing. A marked county sheriff's SUV stopped near the porch. A uniformed deputy stepped out with his weapon drawn. We did not open the door until the satellite operator confirmed that Deputy Aaron Collins had arrived. The real Deputy Collins had not been the voice outside. The deputy told us to remain inside while he checked the property. Another patrol unit was on the way, along with an officer from the State Forestry Department. For the next 15 minutes, we watched flashlight beams move through the trees. Deputy Collins examined the porch, the generator shed, and the crawl space beneath the cabin. He found the floor hatch. He found the overturned wooden chair. Then he found several things we had not seen in Mara's photograph. There was a sleeping bag beneath the far bedroom. Empty cans of food had been stacked behind one of the concrete supports. A plastic storage box contained batteries, candles, cigarette butts, and bottled water. Someone had not simply entered the crawl space that evening. Someone had been living beneath the cabin. The second patrol unit arrived, followed by a forestry officer. They searched the ridge trail and the path leading toward the water tank. The forest was dense and crossed by old logging roads, so they could not determine which direction the man had taken. They did find Mara's missing action camera. It had been placed on a tree stump about 50 yards from the cabin. A small portable speaker sat beside it. The memory card was missing. Another speaker was found beneath the rear bedroom window. The generator had not stopped on its own. Someone had disconnected the fuel line and left the shed door open. The most disturbing discovery came from the hidden camera Mara had noticed along the ridge. It did not belong to the forestry department. The officer removed the camera from the tree and followed its wire to a sealed plastic box hidden beneath the leaves. The box contained a battery pack and a wireless transmitter. The camera had been positioned to record anyone walking between the cabin and the ridge. A second camera faced the access road. A third had been hidden across from the front porch. All three appeared to have been installed recently. Deputy Collins asked us to describe the man wearing the yellow vest. When I mentioned the faded green jacket and dark baseball cap, his expression changed. I asked what was wrong. He looked toward the other officers before answering. A man wearing a green jacket had been seen at the abandoned gas station earlier that afternoon. Someone passing on the highway had reported that he was looking inside parked vehicles. Mara asked whether he had been driving a white utility truck. The deputy said yes. The truck had been reported stolen 2 days earlier from a road maintenance yard almost 60 miles away. The yellow vest had probably been taken from the same location. The officers searched the cabin while we packed our things. None of us considered staying for the rest of the night. The front door was damaged. The electricity remained off, and the knowledge that someone had been sleeping beneath the floor made every room feel dirty. While I carried bags toward the Jeep, Deputy Collins examined the vehicle. He crouched near the rear tire and shined his flashlight beneath the frame. Then he told us we needed to see something. A black plastic cable had been tied around part of the rear axle. The other end extended toward the brake line. The cable had not caused serious damage, but it looked as though someone had been attempting to secure, pull, or interfere with something near the braking system. The deputy could not determine exactly what the man had planned. He told us not to drive the Jeep until it had been inspected by a mechanic. The forestry officer transported us down the mountain, while one of the deputies remained with the vehicle. As we descended, we passed the place where the white utility truck had been parked earlier. It was gone. At the metal gate, we found fresh tire tracks leaving the gravel road and entering an overgrown logging trail. The patrol vehicle could not follow because several fallen trees blocked the entrance. The forestry officer reported the tracks over his radio. No one found the truck that night. We returned to Bellwether shortly after 3 in the morning. The only available place to stay was a roadside motel behind the diner. The room smelled like damp carpet and strong cleaning chemicals, but it had a solid door, bright lights outside, and other people nearby. The 3 of us stayed in one room. None of us slept. Mara sat on one bed reviewing photographs from the day. Owen paced between the window and the bathroom. I kept hearing the recording of his voice in my head. "Ethan, come outside. I found something." Around 5 in the morning, Mara stopped scrolling. She told us to come over. Owen and I stood beside her, concrete supports and wooden chair. Mara enlarged the dark area behind the chair. At first, I saw nothing. Then, the shape became clear. It was a boot. Someone had been crouching behind one of the concrete pillars when Mara pushed her camera through the opening. The flash had illuminated the edge of a muddy work boot and part of a pant leg. The man had been underneath the cabin while we stood outside discussing the chair. He had remained completely silent. He had listened to us. He may have been close enough to reach through the lattice and touch Mara's camera. We contacted Deputy Collins immediately. He came to the motel and copied the photograph. He asked whether any of us noticed the boot when the picture was taken. None of us had. The police searched the mountain again after sunrise. They recovered more items from beneath the cabin. There was a folding knife, rope, bottled water, a notebook, and several camera memory cards. The notebook contained dates, vehicle descriptions, and short observations about previous cabin guests. Some entries included the number of people, how long they stayed, and whether they brought a dog. One entry described a couple who had rented the cabin 3 weeks earlier. 2 people, 1 car, leave lights on, man checks windows. Another entry read, family, 3 children, dog barks, not worth it. The final entry was about us. Jeep, 3 adults, 2 men, 1 woman, no dog, 3 nights. Below that, the man had written that the camera girl found the ridge unit. Then he had added that the quiet one noticed the truck. I was the quiet one. The man had been watching our reactions closely enough to decide which of us had noticed him. There was another sentence written below the others. Wait until they drink. We had brought alcohol with us, but we had not opened it. Police believed he expected us to become intoxicated before he entered the cabin. The memory cards found in the crawl space contained photographs and short videos of previous guests. Most had been recorded through windows or from gaps beneath the cabin floor. There were clips of people cooking dinner, sleeping, changing clothes, arguing. One video showed a woman sitting alone on the porch while someone watched her from the trees. Another showed a man leaving the cabin at night to inspect the generator. The recording ended when he disappeared behind the shed. Police contacted guests identified through the owner's booking records. None of them reported being attacked, but several remembered hearing unexplained sounds. finding food missing, or experiencing sudden generator failures. One couple said they woke up one morning and found the front door open. They had assumed they forgot to lock it. The police never found the suspect. The stolen utility truck was discovered 1 week later in another county. It had been driven into a wooded area and partially covered with branches. Inside, officers found the yellow vest, tools, food wrappers, and a printed copy of the cabin's maintenance instructions. They found no fingerprints that led to an identification. The rental owner temporarily closed the property. The crawl space was sealed, the electronic lock was replaced, and the hidden cameras were removed. The owner refunded our money and offered to pay for repairs to the Jeep. We refused his offer to return after the security improvements were completed. None of us ever went back. For several months, the incident affected each of us differently. Owen stopped making jokes about what happened. He installed additional locks on his apartment door and refused to sleep near an uncovered window. Mara stopped photographing isolated places. She had once wanted to build a career around landscape photography, but after the cabin, she accepted a studio job where every door required a security card. I became sensitive to voices outside. Whenever someone called my name from another room, I needed to see the person before answering. The police occasionally contacted us with updates, but no arrest was made. Then, nearly 5 months after the trip, Mara received a padded envelope in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was the missing memory card from her action camera. She called the police before inserting it into a computer. An investigator collected the card and examined it using an isolated system. Most of the files were ordinary recordings from our trip. The drive through Bellwether, the climb up the mountain, our walk along the ridge. But there was one new video. It had been recorded at 1:16 in the morning, long after the man fled from the cabin. The camera was positioned somewhere among the trees, pointed toward the motel where we stayed. Through the dark image, our room was visible on the second floor. The curtains were closed. Owen's Jeep was not in the parking lot because it remained on the mountain. The recording lasted 43 seconds. Nothing moved for the first 30 seconds. Then, a man stepped into the bottom of the frame. Only the back of his head and shoulders could be seen. He wore a dark baseball cap and a faded green jacket. He stood there looking up at our motel room. Before the video ended, he raised one hand toward the camera. Then he tapped the microphone 3 times. The police examined the envelope. It had been sent from a distribution center several states away. The sender had taken steps to avoid leaving fingerprints, DNA, or traceable information. That was the last direct contact any of us received. At least, it was the last contact we could prove. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if Mara had not discovered the hidden camera along the ridge. Would he have waited until we fell asleep? Would he have entered through the floor hatch? Would he have damaged the Jeep before we tried to leave? Or had he done everything simply because he enjoyed watching frightened strangers? The detail that disturbs me most is not the copied voice or the damaged front door. It is the photograph Mara took beneath the cabin. Whenever I look at it, I think about how casually we stood beside that opening. We joked about the chair. We discussed whether a maintenance worker had left it behind. All the while, a man was crouching in the darkness, only a few feet away. He could see our shoes. He could hear every word we said. He knew which bedroom each of us chose. He knew where Mara left her camera. He knew we had contacted the owner. And when we walked back inside, believing the cabin was empty, he remained beneath the floor and waited for darkness. I have stayed in hotels since then. We have rented apartments and visited friends in unfamiliar places. But I will never again sleep in an isolated cabin. I do not care how peaceful the photographs look. I do not care how many positive reviews the property has. I do not care whether the owner promises that nobody else is nearby. Because sometimes that promise is completely true. There may be no neighbors, no other guests, no one close enough to hear you scream or see someone standing outside your window. But that does not mean you are alone. It may only mean that whoever is watching you has already found the perfect place to hide. The first sign that the man had found us again came through a phone call that should not have been possible. It happened 7 months after the envelope arrived at Mara's apartment. By then, the investigation had gone cold. The police still had the memory card, the notebook, the hidden cameras, and the video from outside the motel. But none of it had led to a name. The stolen utility truck had been wiped clean. The handwriting in the notebook did not match anyone in the local system. The fingerprints taken from the cabin were partial, smudged, or belonged to previous renters. For a while, Detective Collins called us every few weeks. Then, the calls became monthly. Eventually, they stopped. The three of us tried to move on. Owen moved into a new apartment on the 3rd floor of a secure building. He chose the 3rd floor because he no longer wanted anyone standing outside his bedroom window. He installed a camera above the door, another facing the balcony, and sensors on every window. Mara changed jobs and rarely took her camera outside the studio. I stayed in Columbus, but I moved out of my old apartment after someone left a muddy boot print in the hallway outside my door. The building manager said it probably belonged to a maintenance worker. I did not argue. I simply packed my belongings and left. My new apartment was smaller but safer. It was on the 4th floor of a recently constructed building near a busy commercial area. There were security cameras in the lobby, electronic keys at every entrance, and a front desk staffed throughout the night. For the first few months, I slept better. Then, on a Wednesday evening in April, my phone rang at 11:43. The number belonged to Owen. I answered immediately. There was no greeting. For several seconds I heard only faint breathing. Then Owen's voice whispered, "Ethan, come downstairs. I found something." Every muscle in my body locked. The sentence was the same one used outside the cabin. The exact same sentence. I stood beside my kitchen counter, gripping the phone so tightly that my fingers hurt. "Owen," I said. The breathing continued. Then the voice repeated itself. "Ethan, come downstairs. I found something." This time, I could hear a faint, electronic distortion underneath the words. The call ended. I immediately called Owen back. He answered after the second ring. Before I could speak, he asked why I was calling so late. I asked where he was. He said he was at home, watching television. I told him someone had called me from his number. Owen became silent. He asked what the caller said. I did not need to repeat the sentence. He already knew. He told me to lock my door and contact the police. Then he checked the call history on his phone. There was no outgoing call to me. The number on my screen was still his, but his phone had never placed it. Someone had copied his number. The police officer who responded called it spoofing. He explained that criminals could make a call appear to come from almost any number. He said it was probably a prank connected to the publicity surrounding the cabin incident. That explanation did not comfort me. The details of Owen's recorded voice had never been released publicly. The police reports mentioned an audio device, but they did not include the sentence the man played outside the cabin. Only the three of us, Detective Collins, and whoever had been beneath the floor, knew those exact words. The officer searched the building and checked the cameras. No one suspicious appeared in the lobby. No one was waiting downstairs. There was no evidence that anyone had entered the building. The call could have come from anywhere. I spent the rest of the night at Owen's apartment. The next morning, Mara joined us. We contacted Detective Collins, who had since been promoted and transferred to another division. He listened to the recording I made from my phone's voicemail system. The caller had left no message, but my device automatically preserved part of the call because of a security application I installed after the cabin. Collins listened twice. He said the voice sounded like Owen, but he could not determine whether it was the original recording or a new imitation. Then he asked a question I had not considered. Had Owen spoken those words anywhere recently? We searched through our texts, videos, social media accounts, and old recordings. The original action camera video was still in police evidence. Mara had never uploaded it. Owen had not repeated the line publicly. Collins believed the caller had kept a copy of the recording. That meant the man still had our files. It also meant he had preserved them for more than half a year. Collins promised to reopen contact with the investigators in Pennsylvania. For the next several days, nothing happened. Then Mara found an unfamiliar photograph in her studio computer. She worked for a company that photographed furniture and home decorations for online catalogs. The studio was located inside a large converted warehouse. Several photographers shared editing computers, so unusual files sometimes appeared in the wrong folders. This image was different. It had been placed in a directory labeled Miller Ridge. Mara had never created a folder with that name. When she opened it, she saw a photograph of my apartment building. The image had been taken from across the street. My fourth-floor window was visible near the center. The photograph appeared to have been taken at night. Most of the windows were dark, but mine was illuminated. The curtains were open. A figure stood inside. It was me. The file contained no useful location information or camera data. Its creation date had been altered to match the date of our cabin trip. The studio manager checked the security system. Someone had accessed Mara's computer at 2:18 in the morning 2 nights earlier. The warehouse alarm had not been triggered, and no electronic entry key had been used. A security camera covered the main studio floor, but at 2:11, the video signal had gone black. It returned at 2:27. There were no signs of forced entry. The manager assumed someone with building access had entered after hours. The company changed the door codes and replaced several cameras. Mara quit the next day. That was when we realized the man had changed his behavior. At the cabin, he had watched strangers because they entered a place he controlled. Now he was watching us because we had escaped. We met at Owen's apartment to decide what to do. Collins joined by video call. He advised us to stop posting locations online, change our phone numbers, inspect our vehicles, and vary our routines. He also suggested that we temporarily stay somewhere unknown to the public. Owen wanted to leave Ohio. Mara wanted to stay close to the police investigation. I did not know what I wanted. Every option felt like movement in a game whose rules only the other person understood. If we stayed, he might find us. If we ran, he might follow. If we separated, one of us could become easier to approach. Collins asked whether there was anyone connected to the mountain property who might have access to booking information. The rental owner had already been questioned. So had the cleaning staff, repair contractors, previous owners, and forestry employees. The cabin had originally belonged to a state fire service. It was sold to a private buyer in the late 1990s and changed hands twice before becoming a rental property. The current owner purchased it 4 years before our stay. The crawl space had not been included in any recent inspection because the entrance was considered too narrow. According to the owner, nobody should have possessed the electronic door code except him, the cleaner, and the guests. Yet the man had entered it correctly. That detail continued to bother Collins. The stranger had not guessed the final code while we watched. He had already known it. The owner generated a new code for every booking and sent it through the rental platform 2 days before arrival. That meant the man had either accessed the owner's account, watched someone enter the numbers, or found another way to learn each guest's code. The hidden cameras explained how he could record the porch, but they did not explain how he knew the code before we arrived. Collins decided to examine the rental account again. 2 days later, he called with a discovery. The owner's account had been accessed repeatedly from an unknown device over the previous 18 months. The login records showed connections from public networks in libraries, hotels, diners, and truck stops across several states. The earliest suspicious access occurred 1 week before the first notebook entry found beneath the cabin. Someone had been reading the reservation details: names, arrival dates, phone numbers, guest counts, vehicle information included in private messages. The stranger did not need to wait at the mountain to learn who was coming. He knew before they left home. The rental platform suspended the owner's account and contacted law enforcement. Investigators compared the login locations with the stolen utility truck and the postal origin of Mara's envelope. The locations formed no obvious pattern. They were spread across Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky. The man seemed to travel constantly. or he wanted the police to believe he did. Collins asked whether any of us had received strange emails or password reset requests before the trip. Mara remembered one. About a week before we left, she received a message claiming that the rental owner needed confirmation of our arrival time. The email contained a link to a page that looked like the booking website. She entered her login details and submitted our planned schedule. The page displayed an error, so she closed it. She assumed the link was broken. The email was fake. The man had probably stolen her password through that page. Her account contained our reservation, private messages, and possibly the contact information of everyone traveling with her. Mara changed every password she used, but the damage had already been done. The stranger had known our names before we met him on the mountain. He knew our phone numbers. He may have known where we lived. That explained the call. It explained the photograph of my apartment. It did not explain why he waited so long. A week after Collins discovered the account breach, Owen received a package. It was delivered to his old apartment. The current tenant found his name on the label and contacted the building manager, who still had Owen's forwarding information. The package was a small cardboard box sealed with clear tape. There was no return address. Police opened it. Inside was a yellow safety vest. It looked similar to the one worn by the stranger at the mountain, but there was no way to prove it was the same vest recovered from the stolen truck. In one pocket, officers found a key. The key was old, made of dark metal, with the number 17 stamped into the top. There was also a folded piece of paper. It contained 3 words, "Wrong cabin first." No one understood what that meant. Collins sent photographs of the key to the property owner, forestry department, local locksmiths, and historical society. 2 days later, the historical society identified it. The key belonged to an old fire service storage building located approximately 9 miles from the Miller Ridge cabin. The structure had been abandoned in the 1980s. It was known as Station 17. The building did not appear on most modern maps because the access road had been closed for decades. Wrong cabin first. The message seemed to suggest we had misunderstood the origin of the stranger. Maybe the cabin was not where he began. Maybe Station 17 was. Police obtained permission to search it. Collins asked us not to attend. We agreed. Then we drove to Pennsylvania anyway. It was a terrible decision, but by then, the uncertainty had become unbearable. We had spent months waiting for phone calls, photographs, packages, and sounds outside our windows. Every new clue arrived through someone else. Every explanation created more questions. We wanted to be nearby when the building was searched. We did not plan to enter it. We booked rooms at a hotel in Bellwether and told Collins only after we arrived. He was angry. He called us reckless and reminded us that the suspect had already followed us to one motel. Owen said we were tired of hiding. Collins replied that tired people made dangerous decisions. He was right. The search of Station 17 was scheduled for the following morning. The night before, we ate dinner at the same diner where we had seen the man in the green jacket. Carol still worked behind the counter. She recognized us immediately. Her expression tightened when we entered. She asked whether we were the young people from the lookout cabin. Mara said yes. Carol looked toward the windows as if checking whether anyone had followed us. Then she told another employee to cover the counter and led us to a booth in the back. She had read about the investigation in the local newspaper, but many details had been withheld. We told her about the key and Station 17. Her face changed. She asked who gave us the key. Owen said it arrived anonymously. Carol sat down across from us. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she told us that her older brother had worked at Station 17 when they were young. His name was Russell. He disappeared in 1986. The official report said He probably became lost or injured while checking fire roads after a storm. Search teams found his truck near the station, but they never found his body. Russell was not alone when he disappeared. Another seasonal worker named Daniel Vale was stationed with him. Daniel claimed that Russell drove away after an argument. Police questioned Daniel but found no evidence of violence. He left the area within a month. Carol had never believed his story. She said Russell would not have abandoned his truck or family. She also said Daniel was strange. He watched people. He wrote down vehicle license numbers. He could imitate voices. That final detail silenced us. Carol said Daniel entertained other workers by copying supervisors over the radio. He could reproduce a person's speech after listening to them for only a short time. Sometimes he hid in the woods and called people by name just to frighten them. After Russell disappeared, investigators searched Station 17, but found nothing suspicious. The building was closed several years later. Daniel Vale would have been in his late 60s if he was still alive. The stranger we saw looked younger, late 40s or early 50s. Carol said Daniel had a son. His name was Aaron. She had not seen him since he was a child. Collins arrived at the diner shortly after we called him. He listened to Carol's account and wrote down every detail. Police records confirmed that Daniel Vale worked for the fire service in 1986. They also confirmed that his son, Aaron Vale, had been born in 1974. Aaron would have been 48 during our cabin trip. The estimated age matched. There was almost no recent information about him. He had no current driver's license, registered address, employment record, or listed telephone number. His last known address was in West Virginia, but the property had been abandoned for over a decade. Daniel Vale died in 2009. His death certificate listed no permanent residence. The following morning, officers searched Station 17. The building sat deep in the forest beyond a collapsed service road. They used off-road vehicles to reach it. Collins allowed us to wait at a temporary command area near the main road, but he made us promise not to leave the police vehicles. The search team included county deputies, state police, forestry officers, and a dog unit. The old station was a low concrete building with a steel door and narrow windows covered by rusted shutters. Trees had grown across the road, and vines covered much of the roof. The key from Owen's package opened the outer door. Inside, officers found abandoned furniture, rotting paperwork, and animal nests. At first, there was no sign that anyone had been there recently. Then, one of the dogs alerted near a metal cabinet against the rear wall. Behind the cabinet was a narrow doorway. It led to a stairwell descending underground. The building plans contained no basement. The stairs ended in a long concrete room beneath the station. The room had electricity supplied by modern batteries and solar panels hidden outside. There was a bed, shelves of canned food, radio equipment, computers, camera monitors, and hundreds of labeled storage boxes. Some boxes contained photographs of hikers, campers, rental guests, police officers, and local residents. Others held wallets, keys, pieces of clothing, license plates, and electronic devices. Several items came from the Miller Ridge cabin. Police found copies of guest schedules, door codes, and private messages printed from the rental account. They found photographs of all three of us, not only from the mountain, from our homes, from parking lots, from stores, from outside Mara's studio. One photograph showed Owen standing in line at a grocery store only 3 weeks earlier. Another showed me walking into my apartment building. A third showed Mara sitting in her car outside a police station. The most recent photograph had been taken the previous evening. It showed us entering the Bellwether Diner. The suspect had known we returned. The search team immediately locked down the area. Police checked roads, trails, abandoned buildings, and nearby properties. They found no one. Inside the underground room, investigators discovered a wall covered with maps. Small colored pins marked rental cabins, fire towers, campgrounds, hiking shelters, roadside motels, and isolated houses across 5 states. Some locations were crossed out. Others had dates written beside them. Miller Ridge had a red circle around it. Station 17 had been marked with a black square. Our 3 home addresses were connected by thin lines of red thread. Beneath my address, someone had written "listens" at windows. Beneath Owen's address, "watches cameras." Beneath Mara's, "keeps copies." There was another map. This one showed Bellwether and the surrounding mountain roads. 3 routes had been highlighted. One led to Miller Ridge, one led to Station 17. The third led north into an area marked only by the handwritten word "home." Police followed that route. It ended at an abandoned mining road leading into state forest land. The road was too narrow for normal vehicles, so officers continued on foot. After 2 miles, they found a small structure built against a rock face. It resembled a hunting cabin, but much of it had been concealed beneath branches and dark tarps. The front door stood open. Inside, they found food, fuel, clothing, batteries, and radio equipment. A bed was still warm. The suspect had left shortly before the officers arrived. Behind the cabin was an opening in the rock. It led into an abandoned mine tunnel. The tunnel divided into several branches. Search dogs followed the scent for nearly half a mile before losing it near an underground stream. The mine system extended for miles beneath the mountain. Some passages connected to collapsed shafts and old ventilation exits that were no longer recorded on maps. Aaron Vale knew the area better than the search teams. He disappeared underground. The police remained in the forest for 3 days. They found additional supplies hidden throughout the mine. They found old fire service uniforms, stolen license plates, wigs, tools, and multiple yellow safety vests. They found portable speakers and recording devices. They did not find Aaron. During the search, Collins showed us a photograph recovered from Station 17. It had been taken at the old fire cabin in 1986. 4 men stood outside the building. One was Carol's brother Russell. Another was Daniel Vale. The third was unidentified. The fourth was a young boy, Aaron. He appeared to be about 12 years old. He stood slightly apart from the adults, looking directly at the camera. Behind them, partially hidden beneath the station, was an open wooden hatch, the same kind of hatch we found beneath the rental cabin. Collins believed Daniel had used underground storage spaces while working for the fire service. Aaron may have grown up learning the trails, buildings, radio systems, and hidden maintenance areas. When the old properties were abandoned or sold, he continued using them. Carol identified the third adult in the photograph as a contractor named Lewis Kern. Kern had also disappeared in the late 1980s. His vehicle was found near another fire road. His body was never recovered. Investigators began examining the mine tunnels for human remains. They found bones within the first week. At least 2 individuals had been buried beneath a collapsed section near an old equipment chamber. Identification took months. One set belonged to Russell, the other belonged to Lewis Kern. Both had suffered fractures consistent with blunt force injuries. The discovery changed the investigation. Aaron was no longer only a stalker or intruder. He had grown up around at least one suspected killer. He may have helped conceal crimes, or he may have continued them. Police searched records from every location marked on the wall maps. Several corresponded with unresolved missing person cases. A college student disappeared from a campground in 2003. A traveling nurse vanished near a roadside motel in 2011. A retired couple went missing while staying at a rental cabin in 2017. There was no immediate proof that Aaron was involved, but photographs of each person were found in Station 17. Collins urged us to leave Bellwether. We did not argue this time. The police escorted us to the highway. We returned to Ohio and stayed together at a secure hotel under different names. For the next month, officers monitored our apartments and workplaces. Nothing happened. The media learned about the underground room and the remains. News crews arrived in Bellwether. Reporters published stories about the fire station, the hidden cameras, and the unidentified man living in the mountains. Police released Aaron Vale's childhood photograph and a digitally aged image. Tips came in from several states. Some people reported seeing him at campgrounds. Others claimed he worked temporary jobs using false names. A truck driver remembered a man in a green jacket asking questions about isolated rest stops. A motel clerk in Kentucky recognized him as a guest who paid cash and requested a room overlooking the parking lot. None of the sightings led to an arrest. Then Collins called me privately. He had found a video inside one of the Station 17 computers. The file was labeled First Cabin. It showed the interior of a small room. The date was from 1986, only 2 days before Russell disappeared. The video quality was poor, but two voices could be heard arguing. One belonged to Daniel Vale. The other was probably Russell. Russell accused Daniel of watching guests at remote fire cabins. Daniel denied it. Russell said he had found notebooks, photographs, and recordings. Then a child's voice spoke from somewhere near the camera. It said Russell should not have looked. The video ended. The child was Aaron. Collins believed Daniel began the surveillance system and taught his son to continue it. The phrase from Owen's package finally made sense. Wrong cabin first. Miller Ridge was not the first cabin. Station 17 was where the pattern began. Aaron had sent us the key because he wanted the police to find the underground room. That raised another question. Why would he expose himself? Collins believed the answer was control. Aaron did not see the investigation as a threat. He saw it as a story he could direct. He chose which clues appeared. He chose when we became afraid. He chose where police searched. Even the discovery of Station 17 may have been part of his plan. The search emptied resources into one mountain area, while he disappeared somewhere else. 2 weeks later, the rental owner of Miller Ridge contacted Collins. Someone had entered the cabin again. The property had remained closed since our incident. The door locks were changed. The crawl space was sealed with metal panels, and cameras were installed around the clearing. A motion alert showed a figure approaching at 3:14 in the morning. The person wore a green jacket and baseball cap. He stood on the porch and looked directly at the security camera. Then he held up a handwritten sign. It said, "Not home." The figure entered the cabin using the new door code. The cameras inside stopped recording. When police arrived, the cabin was empty. The metal panels beneath the building had been removed from the inside. A new tunnel had been opened beneath the crawl space. It led away from the cabin and connected with an old drainage channel descending the mountain. Aaron had returned without being seen. He wanted the police to know Miller Ridge was never his real home. The message on the map referred to somewhere else. The highlighted road north. The hidden hunting structure. The mine tunnels. But investigators had already searched those places. Collins suspected the word home referred to a location beyond the mine. The underground stream where the dogs lost the scent flowed north. Historical mining maps showed that the stream passed beneath several ridges before emerging near an abandoned company town. The town had been deserted since the 1950s. Only foundations, collapsed houses, and one stone church remained. Police searched it. Beneath the church, they found another room. It was larger than the one at Station 17. The walls were covered with shelves. The shelves held thousands of cassette tapes, digital drives, photographs, letters, and notebooks. The collection spanned more than 40 years. Some recordings had been made by Daniel. Others were Aaron's. They documented guests at remote properties, hikers on trails, residents of Bellwether, police searches, and people passing through nearby towns. The oldest tapes captured conversations between forestry workers. The newest files contained footage of us. One folder was labeled Cabin 3. It contained videos from my apartment, Owen's building, and Mara's studio. Cabin 1 referred to Station 17. Cabin 2 referred to Miller Ridge. We were Cabin 3. Aaron did not think of a cabin as a building. A cabin was a group of people he selected, a place he could observe, a controlled environment. He had turned our homes into the next cabin. Police found another folder labeled Cabin 4. It contained photographs of a family in Indiana, a husband, a wife, and 2 children. Investigators contacted them immediately. The family had recently booked an isolated lake house through the same rental platform used for Miller Ridge. They canceled the trip. Officers searched the lake house and found hidden cameras inside the walls. Beneath the dock was a waterproof box containing food, batteries, and a portable speaker. Aaron had already prepared the next location. The family had no connection to us. They were simply next. The discovery probably saved their lives. The police issued a nationwide alert. Rental companies were warned to inspect remote properties for unauthorized cameras, crawl spaces, and altered locks. Several hidden devices were found. Some belonged to ordinary criminals. At least 3 appeared connected to Aaron. Still, no one found him. Months passed. The public attention faded. The mine searches ended. Station 17 was sealed. The stone church was emptied and placed under surveillance. The Miller Ridge cabin was demolished. The owner decided the property could never be rented safely again. Before demolition, investigators photographed every wall, pipe, and foundation. They found one final message written beneath the floor hatch. It had been carved into a support beam. "You only see me when I want you to." By the following winter, the 3 of us had changed again. Owen left Ohio and moved to Arizona. He said he wanted open land where no one could hide beneath thick trees. Mara moved to Chicago. She chose a high-rise apartment with 24-hour security and windows that did not open. I stayed near Columbus because I refused to let Aaron determine where I lived. That was what I told people. The truth was simpler. I no longer believed distance mattered. He traveled across states. He entered secure buildings. He watched homes from streets, trees, parking lots, and hidden rooms. Moving would not protect me. Only awareness might. I checked every room before sleeping. I covered cameras when I was not using them. I inspected vents, smoke detectors, mirrors, outlets, and spaces beneath furniture. I stopped answering unexpected calls. For almost a year, nothing happened. Then, one night in February, I woke to the sound of 3 knocks. They were not on the front door. They came from inside my bedroom wall. I sat upright in bed. The room was dark. The building heating system made noises during cold weather. Pipes expanded. Ductwork clicked. Neighbors dropped objects. I told myself it was nothing. Then the knocks came again. 3 slow impacts, directly beside my bed. I turned on the lamp. The wall looked normal. I called building security. 2 guards searched the hallway, neighboring apartments, maintenance rooms, and stairwells. They found nothing. The apartment beside mine was vacant. The wall between us contained plumbing access panels, but all were secured. The next morning, maintenance workers opened the vacant unit. Inside the bedroom closet, they found a small hole cut into the drywall. The hole led into the space behind my bedroom wall. A portable speaker had been placed inside. It was connected to a timer. The speaker contained only one audio file, 3 knocks. The device had been installed before I moved into the apartment. No one knew who placed it. The previous tenant had lived there for 5 years and reported no unusual sounds. The timer had been set for that exact night. More than 18 months after the cabin incident, Aaron had prepared the knock before I ever signed the lease. That meant he knew which apartment I would choose before I moved in, or someone had entered later and changed the timer. Both explanations were impossible to prove. Police examined the device. There were no fingerprints, no readable serial number, no data revealing who programmed it. Collins called me after hearing what happened. He said the speaker might have been installed by a copycat. The cabin case had received national attention. Details about the 3 knocks had become public. Anyone could recreate them. I asked whether he believed that. He did not answer. That evening, I packed a bag and drove to Owen's new home in Arizona. Mara flew there the next day. It was the first time the three of us had been together in almost a year. Owen lived outside a small desert town in a single-story house, surrounded by gravel, cactus, and open land. There were no forests, no crawl space, no nearby buildings. From the porch, we could see for miles. For the first time since Pennsylvania, I felt like there was nowhere for anyone to hide. We spent 3 quiet days together. We cooked, talked, and avoided discussing Aaron. On the 4th evening, Mara noticed a light on the horizon. It appeared near an empty stretch of desert north of the house. At first, we thought it belonged to an off-road vehicle. The light remained stationary. Then it flashed. 2 short signals, one long, the same pattern we heard from the trees outside Miller Ridge. Owen went inside and retrieved binoculars. Through them, he saw a person standing beside a dark vehicle. The figure wore a baseball cap. Police arrived within 15 minutes. The vehicle was gone. Officers followed tire tracks into the desert, but the tracks ended on a rocky road and disappeared. At the location where the figure stood, they found a wooden chair. It was the same style as the chair beneath the cabin. On the seat was a printed photograph. The picture showed the 3 of us sitting on Owen's porch earlier that afternoon. It had been taken from the exact place where the figure stood. On the back, someone had written one sentence: "No place is empty enough." That was the final message connected to Aaron Vale. It happened more than 2 years ago. He has never been arrested. Police continue to connect old surveillance materials and missing person cases to the collection found beneath the church. Some families finally received answers. Others received only photographs, proving their loved ones had crossed paths with the Vales. No one knows how many locations Daniel and Aaron used. No one knows how many hidden rooms remain. No one knows whether Aaron is alive, injured, imprisoned under another name, or still traveling. Mara believes he is alive. Owen says, "It does not matter, because we will spend the rest of our lives expecting him." I try not to think about it. But every few months, I receive a message from someone who has heard about the case. A hiker notices a camera where no official trail camera should be. A renter discovers food missing from a locked cabin. A family hears someone walking beneath a house that has no basement. Most reports are probably unrelated. Fear changes the way people interpret ordinary things. A settling foundation becomes a footstep. A broken branch becomes a person following you. A strange car becomes a stolen utility truck. I understand that. I also understand that somewhere in the mountains, an entire room of recordings existed for decades without anyone finding it. I understand that a man lived beneath a rental cabin while strangers slept above him. I understand that he knew our names, our homes, our voices, and our routines. And I understand that before we arrived at Miller Ridge, we believed isolation meant safety. We thought danger came from crowded streets, unlocked doors, and strangers following too closely in parking lots. We believed an empty mountain removed those risks. But isolation does not remove danger. It removes witnesses. It gives someone time. It gives them silence. It allows them to learn how you move when you think no one is watching. Sometimes, late at night, I remember the words carved beneath the demolished cabin. "You only see me when I want you to." For years I interpreted that sentence as a threat. Now I think it was an explanation. We did not discover Aaron beneath the floor. He allowed us to hear him. We did not find Station 17. He mailed us the key. We did not uncover his next target. He left the folder where police would find it. Every clue moved us in the direction he selected. Every discovery happened when he wanted it to happen. Even the light in the Arizona desert may not have been an attempt to frighten us. It may have been his way of proving that he could still reach us, that he could stand in open ground with nowhere to hide and remain untouchable. I no longer stay in cabins, lake houses, remote rentals, or homes with accessible crawl spaces. I avoid bedrooms on the ground floor. I do not leave cameras charging beside windows. When I enter a hotel room, I check behind the curtains, beneath the bed, inside the closet, and around every vent. Then I stand completely still and listen. Most of the time, I hear plumbing, traffic, air conditioning, and voices from neighboring rooms. Ordinary sounds, safe sounds. But every once in a while, everything becomes quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. The kind of quiet we heard on Miller Ridge. The kind that makes your own breathing sound unfamiliar. When that happens, I think of the wooden chair beneath the cabin. I think of the muddy boot hidden behind the concrete support. I think of the voice calling my name through the floor. And before I turn off the light, I always check the wall beside my bed. Because the scariest thing I learned was not that someone might be watching from the darkness. It was that the darkness might already be inside the room. And it may have been waiting there long before you arrived. 3 months after we found the wooden chair in the Arizona desert, Owen disappeared from his own house. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no blood, no struggle. His phone, wallet, keys, and shoes were still inside. The security system recorded every door and window remaining closed throughout the night. But when the sun came up, Owen was gone. The only thing left behind was a message written across his bedroom wall. He knows which one of us opened the door. I received the call at 5:30 in the morning. Mara was crying so hard that I could barely understand her. She had been trying to reach Owen since midnight. The three of us had developed a habit of checking in whenever something felt wrong. Sometimes it was only a car parked too long outside an apartment, or an unexpected sound near a window. Most of those alerts ended with one of us feeling embarrassed. That night, Owen sent Mara a single text. "Someone is walking on the roof." She called him immediately. He did not answer. She tried again. Nothing. Then she called me. I had been asleep and did not hear my phone until nearly 5. By that time, Mara had already contacted the local sheriff's department. 2 deputies went to Owen's house. They found the front door locked. His vehicle was in the driveway. The alarm was still active. They entered using an emergency code Owen had given the security company. The house was empty. I booked the first available flight to Arizona. By noon, Mara and I were sitting in the back of a sheriff's vehicle outside Owen's home. The desert looked exactly as it had during our previous visit. The land around the house was flat and exposed. There were no forests, no neighboring buildings, and no obvious places where a person could hide. That had been the reason Owen chose it. He believed distance and open land would protect him. Now the emptiness seemed to make his disappearance even more impossible. Detective Collins had already been contacted. He was traveling from Pennsylvania, although he no longer had official authority in Arizona. The sheriff's department agreed to let him assist because of his knowledge of Aaron Vale and the earlier cases. Until Collins arrived, a local detective named Harris led the investigation. Harris was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s. He spoke quietly and never seemed rushed. He walked us through the house room by room, asking whether anything appeared unusual. The living room was exactly as I remembered it. The couch faced a large window overlooking the desert. A television remote sat on the coffee table. A half-empty bottle of water stood beside it. The kitchen light was still on. A bowl containing dry cereal sat on the counter. Owen's phone was plugged into a charger near the sink. His wallet and keys had been placed beside it. There was no broken furniture, no overturned chair, no indication that he expected to leave. The bedroom was different. The message had been written across the wall above Owen's bed in thick black letters. "He knows which one of us opened the door." The words were uneven, as though written quickly. Detective Harris asked whether I understood the message. I told him I did not. Mara stared at it for a long time. Then she asked what had been used to write the words. Harris pointed toward a black permanent marker on the floor. The marker belonged to Owen. His fingerprints were on it. No other usable prints had been found. Harris believed Owen may have written the message himself. I asked why he would do that. The detective said that was what they needed to determine. The security system showed that Owen activated the alarm at 10:47 the previous night. No exterior door or window opened afterward. The roof camera lost its signal at 11:59. At 12:03, Owen sent the message about someone walking above him. At 12:16, the interior motion sensor in the hallway detected movement. At 12:19, the bedroom sensor activated. At 12:22, every sensor in the house stopped reporting. The alarm remained active, but the system did not record another movement until deputies entered after 4 in the morning. Harris believed someone had disabled the internal sensors without opening the control panel. The cameras contained no useful footage. At 11:58, each camera showed the same brief distortion. Then the video feeds froze. The frozen images continued recording for several hours, making it appear that nothing moved. Someone had not merely turned off the cameras. They had replaced the live feeds with repeating images. That required access to Owen's security network. The same thing had happened to Mara's studio cameras. It had happened at Miller Ridge. It had happened outside the old fire station. Aaron understood surveillance systems because he had spent most of his life building and defeating them. The deputies searched the roof. They found several marks in the dust near the air conditioning unit. The marks resembled footprints, but the wind had damaged them. The metal cover above the ventilation shaft had been removed and placed back into position. The shaft was too narrow for an adult to crawl through, but a flexible wire or camera could have been lowered inside. Harris brought in a building inspector. The inspector discovered something the deputies had missed. A section of drywall inside Owen's bedroom closet sounded hollow. The house had been built only 4 years earlier, and the official plans showed nothing behind that wall except insulation and an exterior support beam. Workers removed the drywall. Behind it was a narrow opening. The opening led downward. Someone had constructed a vertical passage between the closet wall and the outer foundation. A metal ladder descended into darkness. The passage was not part of the original building. The builder had never seen it. The previous owner denied knowing about it. Harris ordered everyone away from the opening until a tactical team arrived. Mara and I waited outside while officers entered. The ladder descended approximately 12 feet into a small underground chamber beneath the house. From that chamber, a narrow tunnel extended toward the desert. The tunnel walls had been reinforced with plywood and metal supports. Battery-powered lights had been installed along the ceiling. The air inside was dry. Fresh footprints covered the dirt floor. One set led toward the house, another led away. The tunnel continued for nearly 200 yards before emerging beneath a pile of rocks in a dry wash. From the surface, the exit looked completely natural. Aaron had found another way to enter a locked home without opening a door. Or he had built it himself. That possibility seemed impossible at first. Owen had purchased the house less than a year earlier. He hired inspectors. He replaced locks. He installed security cameras. He checked beneath floors and inside closets. But he had never considered that someone might approach from below. The chamber beneath the bedroom contained a wooden chair, a portable speaker, a small monitor connected to cameras hidden inside the house, and a notebook. The notebook contained observations about Owen, what time he woke up, what he ate, when he left home, which windows he checked before sleeping, how often he called Mara and me. One entry said that Owen watched the security cameras more than he watched the desert. Another said he checked the roof whenever birds landed. The final entry had been written the night before he disappeared. He still thinks the walls belong to him. Police searched the tunnel and surrounding desert with dogs, drones, and helicopters. They found Owen's footprints near the hidden exit. They also found a second set, belonging to someone wearing larger boots. Both sets crossed the dry wash and reached a rocky area where the ground no longer held clear impressions. There were no vehicle tracks nearby. The dogs followed the scent for almost a mile before losing it at a paved road. Harris believed Owen had been taken to a waiting vehicle. I asked how someone forced him through a tunnel without leaving signs of a struggle. The detective did not have an answer. The underground room contained no blood, restraints, or weapons. Owen may have gone willingly. Mara refused to believe that. She said there was no reason he would leave without his phone or shoes. Harris pointed out that fear could make people behave unpredictably. If Owen believed someone was inside the house, he may have entered the tunnel while searching for an escape. I thought about the message on the wall. He knows which one of us opened the door. Maybe it was not a warning about Aaron entering the house. Maybe it was about something we had already done. Collins arrived that evening. He studied the wall message and asked us to remember every door connected to the case. The front door at Miller Ridge, the floor hatch, the entrance to Station 17, the mine tunnel, the stone church basement, the door to Owen's house. We had opened dozens. None seemed more important than the others. Then Mara remembered the cabin photographs. When we first arrived at Miller Ridge, the front door was already open. Owen pushed it wider using a tire iron. He had been the first person to cross the threshold, I told Collins. He shook his head. The message said one of us opened the door, not entered first. Mara suddenly looked toward me. The electronic lock, she said. I was the one who closed and tested the front door after we searched the cabin. I entered the door code later while checking the lock. Was stolen. Each of us had opened something. The message could refer to any of us. Collins asked whether Aaron had ever tried to separate us emotionally. We said no, but that was not completely true. The notebook beneath Miller Ridge labeled us individually. Camera girl, quiet one. The man who checked windows. Aaron studied us as separate subjects. He knew which fears belonged to each person. He knew Owen depended on security systems. He knew Mara trusted images. He knew I trusted patterns and explanations. Maybe the message was not supposed to make sense. Maybe it was supposed to make us accuse one another. The search continued throughout the night. At 2 a.m, officers found a backpack beside a road 8 miles from Owen's house. It belonged to him. Inside were a bottle of water, a flashlight, and one of his jackets. There was also an audio recorder. The device contained a 19-minute file. The recording began with Owen breathing heavily. He seemed to be moving through the underground tunnel. The sound of his bare feet against dirt could be heard beneath his breathing. Then Owen whispered that someone was inside the house. He said he had heard footsteps on the roof and movement inside the walls. He found the opening in his closet after the speaker beneath the floor began playing my voice. The recording did not contain that section, but Owen described it. He said the voice told him to enter the tunnel. It told him Mara and I were waiting at the other end. Owen knew it was fake. He entered anyway, because the wall behind him began moving. According to the recording, someone was pushing through the closet from inside the house. Owen believed the tunnel was the only escape. For the first 6 minutes, he crawled away from the house. Then he stopped. A second voice appeared on the recording. It was faint but understandable. The voice belonged to Owen. It came from farther down the tunnel. It called his name. Owen whispered that the voice was using an older recording. Then a light appeared ahead of him. He said someone was standing near the exit. The recording captured several seconds of silence. Then Owen spoke louder. "Who are you?" No answer. He asked again. The other person played a recording of Mara's voice. It said, "Owen, open the door." A few seconds later, the sound of metal scraping against dirt filled the recording. Owen began moving backward. Then he stopped again. He whispered that someone was behind him. The final minute contained only breathing and slow footsteps approaching from both directions. One person came from the hidden exit. Another came from the house. Owen was trapped between them. At 18 minutes and 42 seconds, a male voice spoke close to the recorder. It said, "You were never watching the right camera." The file ended. There were two people. That changed everything. For years, we assumed Aaron worked alone. The cameras, the tunnels, the false identities, the stolen vehicles, the packages, the travel across multiple states. Whenever events happened too quickly or in places far apart, we explained it by assuming Aaron had prepared them in advance. Now we knew another person may have been helping him, maybe more than one. Collins immediately reviewed every part of the investigation. The man in the green jacket may have been Aaron. The person beneath the cabin could have been someone else. One person could have distracted police, while another watched us at the motel. Someone could have mailed the memory card while Aaron remained near Bellwether. Someone could have installed the speaker inside my apartment before I moved there. The message from the Arizona desert may have been delivered by a partner. We had spent years searching for one man. We had never seriously considered a group. The police examined the audio file. The final male voice did not match any known recording of Aaron, although they had very little confirmed audio to compare. It sounded younger than the man we met at Miller Ridge. Harris asked whether Aaron had children. No official records showed any, but Aaron himself had almost disappeared from public records after childhood. A person could live under a false name for decades. A child could do the same. Police searched the road where Owen's backpack was found. A traffic camera at a distant intersection recorded a dark van passing at 1:37 in the morning. The license plate had been stolen from a vehicle in Nevada. The driver could not be seen. A second person sat in the passenger seat. Something moved behind them. The van traveled north. Authorities issued alerts across Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and California. The next morning, a gas station clerk near Kingman reported seeing a similar vehicle. The clerk remembered two men. One appeared to be in his late 60s. The other looked approximately 30. The older man wore a green jacket. The younger man bought water, food, and medical supplies. A third person remained in the back of the van. The clerk could not see the person's face. Security footage confirmed the van. Police arrived 2 hours later. It was already gone. The footage showed the younger man clearly enough to create an image. He had short brown hair, a narrow face, and a dark scar running from his left ear toward his jaw. No facial recognition system identified him. Morris stared at the image for several minutes. Then she said she had seen him before, not in person, in one of the photographs recovered from Station 17. The police archive contained thousands of images, but Mara remembered details others missed. She asked Collins to find a photograph showing a family outside a lake cabin. After several hours, investigators located it. The picture had been taken in 2007. A husband and wife stood beside two teenage boys. One of the boys had a narrow face. A small mark appeared near his left ear. The family had been photographed from the trees. The parents were identified as Michael and Laura Mercer. Both disappeared during a camping trip in 2010. Their vehicle was found near an abandoned fire road in West Virginia. The two sons were never officially reported missing because relatives believed they had gone to live with their father's family. No one could establish where they went. The older son was named Caleb. The younger was Noah. The man in the gas station footage resembled Noah Mercer. If the identification was correct, he would have been 31. The exact age of the younger man. Police examined files connected to the Mercer family. A notebook recovered beneath the stone church contained a brief entry from 2007. Family of 4. Boys observant. Father leaves door unlocked. The entry had been written in Daniel Vale's handwriting. Aaron and Daniel had watched the Mercer family years before the parents disappeared. Collins believed the boys may have been abducted or recruited. The idea sounded impossible, but the Vale collection proved they did more than observe strangers. Weaknesses. They selected people. Aaron may have taken children and raised them within the same system his father built. That would explain how the surveillance continued across so many states. It would explain the multiple cameras, vehicles, tunnels, and voices. It would explain how Aaron appeared to be everywhere. He was not everywhere. His students were. The search for the van continued for 2 days. Then it was found abandoned near an old motel outside Las Vegas. The vehicle had been cleaned. Owen was not inside. Police found blood on the floor. Testing confirmed it belonged to him. The amount was small enough that the injury may not have been life-threatening. A motel camera recorded the van arriving shortly before dawn. 3 people exited: the older man, the younger man, and Owen. Owen walked without assistance. He wore shoes that did not belong to him, and kept both hands visible. The younger man followed several feet behind. The older man carried a small bag. They entered room 17. At 8:12, the younger man left alone. At 8:30, the older man walked toward the parking lot. At 8:34, the camera signal froze. When the image returned 20 minutes later, the van and all 3 people were gone. Room 17 had been cleaned. The sheets were missing. The bathroom mirror had been removed from the wall. Beneath it, investigators found a sentence scratched into the plaster: "The quiet one will open the final door." That message was for me. Collins asked whether Aaron had ever called me the quiet one directly. He had not. The label appeared only in the notebook beneath Miller Ridge, and in police reports that were never released publicly. Whoever scratched the message had access to evidence or had been present at the cabin. The motel clerk remembered nothing unusual. She never saw the guests because the room had been paid for using an online account created under a false name. The number 17 was not a coincidence. Station 17. Room 17. The key stamped 17. Aaron used the number as a marker. Collins believed it might refer to the number of locations connected to his system. Investigators counted known sites: Miller Ridge, Station 17, the mine cabin, the stone church, the lake house, Owen's house, my apartment, Mara's studio, several remote cabins identified from cameras. The total exceeded 17. Maybe it was a date, a person, a door. We did not know. A day later, I received a package at the hotel where Mara and I were staying. The police had not released the name of the hotel. The room had been booked through a government account. The package was addressed to me. Inside was a small brass key marked with the number 1. There was also a photograph of Owen. He sat in a wooden chair inside a concrete room. His hands were not tied. His eyes were open. A newspaper lay across his lap. The date proved the photograph had been taken that morning. On the back, someone had written an address. The address belonged to an abandoned self-storage facility outside Barstow, California. Police searched it immediately. The property contained more than 100 storage units. Most were empty or filled with abandoned furniture. Unit 1 opened with the brass key. Inside was another wooden chair. On the chair was a small television. When officers entered, the screen turned on. A pre-recorded video showed Owen sitting in the same concrete room. He looked exhausted but uninjured. A speaker outside the camera frame asked him who opened the door. Owen did not answer. The question repeated: "Who opened the door?" Owen said he did not know. The speaker asked which friend noticed the truck first. Owen said Ethan. Which friend found the camera? Mara. Which friend entered the crawl space? None of us. The voice corrected him. Someone always enters. The video ended. Behind the television was another key. It was marked with the number 2. A note listed a second address. Police recognized the pattern immediately. Aaron was creating a sequence. Each key opened another location. Each location contained a clue. He wanted us to follow. Collins refused to let Mara or me participate. Police opened the second location without us. It was a small locker at a bus station in Los Angeles. Inside was a key marked 3 and an old cassette recorder. The tape contained a voice from 1986. Daniel Vale spoke to a child. He explained that people revealed themselves whenever they believed they were alone. He told the child that doors were more important than walls. Walls kept people inside. Doors made them choose. The child asked, "What happened if someone refused to open one?" Daniel said, "Patience always opened it eventually." The child's voice belonged to Aaron. The third key led to a closed restaurant. The fourth led to an abandoned trailer. The fifth led to a mailbox. Every location contained another recording or photograph. Police followed the sequence for 3 days. Key 6 revealed a map. Key 7 contained a piece of Owen's jacket. Key 8 contained photographs of Mara entering the police hotel. Key 9 opened a basement room where someone had recently slept. Key 10 led to a camera pointed at the highway. Each clue pulled investigators farther north. The path crossed California and entered Nevada. Collins believed Aaron was using the sequence to move police away from Owen, but ignoring it was impossible. Every location proved Owen had been alive recently. At Key 11, the message changed. The storage unit contained 3 keys, one marked 12, one marked 13, one marked 14. A note said only one path leads forward. Police tested all 3 locations simultaneously. Key 12 opened an empty cabin. Key 13 opened a storm drain containing a camera. Key 14 opened a locked room inside an abandoned hospital. Owen's blood was found there. A video showed him being questioned again. The speaker asked which one of us opened the first door. This time, Owen answered. He said, "I did." I watched the video with Collins. I could not remember opening anything important. Owen may have been lying to protect Mara. He may have been confused, or he may have understood the question. The next key was hidden inside the hospital room. It was marked 15. The address led to an abandoned mining settlement in Nevada. Police entered at sunrise. They found underground rooms similar to those beneath Station 17. There were beds, food, monitors, maps, but no people. One wall displayed photographs of us taken over several years. The final image showed Owen entering the tunnel beneath his Arizona home. Another photograph showed Mara and me boarding the flight to Arizona. Someone had been watching from the airport. Key 16 was attached beneath the frame. There was no address, only geographic coordinates. The coordinates pointed toward a dry lake bed more than 2 hours away. Police established a perimeter before approaching. At the center of the lake bed stood a single metal door. No building surrounded it. The door rose vertically from the cracked earth. It had been mounted into a concrete frame descending underground. There was no handle on the outside. A keyhole was marked with the number 16. The key opened it. A stairway descended beneath the desert. The underground structure was enormous. It appeared to be part of an abandoned military communications facility built during the Cold War. Old cables ran along the walls. Rusted equipment filled side rooms. Long hallways extended in several directions. New electrical lines had been installed beside the original systems. Fresh footprints covered the dust. Officers found live camera feeds showing roads, storage facilities, hotel parking lots, and our current location. Aaron's group had been watching the investigation unfold. They knew where police were positioned. They knew which teams entered each hallway. Then every monitor displayed the same message: "Bring Ethan to door 17." Collins refused. Seconds later, a live video appeared. Owen sat on the floor of a small room. A metal door stood behind him. A timer on the wall showed 30 minutes. The room began filling with smoke. A voice said the final door could only be opened from inside the facility. It required the quiet one. Police searched for Owen's room, but the hallways had been altered. Doors were sealed. Maps were inaccurate. Cameras showed officers repeatedly reaching dead ends. The timer continued counting down. Collins argued with the tactical commander. They believed bringing me inside would create another hostage. I told them I was going anyway. Mara tried to stop me. I said Aaron had been preparing this moment since Miller Ridge. He believed I opened the first door. Whether that was true did not matter. He wanted me at the final one. If I refused, Owen might die. Collins gave me protective gear and placed a tracking device beneath my shirt. 4 armed officers entered with me. We followed instructions displayed on monitors. Turn left, continue forward, open the red door, leave the officers behind. The team refused the final instruction. The screen showed Owen coughing as the smoke thickened. I told the officers to remain. Collins spoke through my earpiece. He said they would stay within sight. I continued alone. At the end of the hallway, I found a steel door marked 17. There was no keyhole. A small camera above it turned toward me. A speaker activated. A man asked whether I remembered opening the door. I said no. The voice asked whether I remembered the diner, the gas station, the front door standing open, the floor hatch. I said I remembered all of it. The voice told me the first door was not at Miller Ridge. It was the fake rental email. Mara had opened it. She entered her password. She gave Aaron access to our reservation, but the message said one of us opened the door, not clicked a link. The voice said Mara opened the digital door, Owen opened the physical door, and I opened the final one by continuing to search for answers. Aaron had assigned each of us a role. Mara revealed the path. Owen crossed the threshold. I refused to stop following. He did not need to force me into the facility. He only needed to place Owen at the end. The door unlocked. I opened it. The room beyond was empty. There was no Owen, only another monitor. The live video had been pre-recorded. The timer reached 0. Nothing happened. The smoke had been theatrical fog. Owen was not in that room. He had never been there. The screen changed. It showed Mara standing beside Collins at the entrance. Behind them, one of the tactical officers removed his helmet. It was Noah Mercer. The younger man from the gas station footage had entered with the police team. He wore a stolen uniform. Before anyone reacted, he grabbed Mara and pulled her through a side door. The camera feed went black. I ran back through the hallway. Alarms sounded throughout the facility. The tactical team separated to search for Mara. Collins shouted through my earpiece, but his voice broke apart beneath electronic interference. I reached the entrance chamber. A uniform lay on the floor. There was blood near the side door. The stolen officer had been found unconscious in a vehicle outside the perimeter. Noah had taken his equipment and entered during the confusion. The entire sequence of keys was designed to bring all 3 of us together. Owen had been taken first. I had been drawn inside. Now Mara was gone. A message appeared on the nearest monitor. 3 people, 1 vehicle, no dog. The same words written beneath Miller Ridge. Then a second line appeared. Now the cabin is complete. Playing through the ventilation system. The sound repeated from hallway to hallway. Police searched the facility for 9 hours. They found multiple hidden exits. One opened into a drainage tunnel nearly a mile away. Fresh tire tracks led from the tunnel toward the highway. Owen and Mara were gone. Aaron and Noah were gone. The facility contained no evidence revealing their destination. The key sequence ended at 17. There was no 18th key, no address, no map, no next clue. For the first time, Aaron had completed a pattern and left us with nothing. I returned to the hotel under armed protection. I did not sleep. Collins sat in the hallway outside my room. At 3 in the morning, my phone received a video call. The number belonged to Mara. Police traced it while I answered. The screen showed darkness. Then Mara's face appeared. She was alive. She had a bruise near her temple, but she appeared conscious. Owen sat beside her. They were inside a moving vehicle. Neither spoke. A voice from the front seat told me to ask one question. I asked where they were. The voice said that was the wrong question. I asked what they wanted. Wrong again. I looked at Mara. She moved her eyes toward the left side of the screen. A window. Outside, lights passed in repeating intervals. Owen lifted one hand. His fingers tapped against his leg. 2 short taps, 1 long, the whistle pattern from Miller Ridge. Then he changed the rhythm. 5 taps, pause. 3 taps, pause. 1 tap. 1 did not understand. The voice told me I had 10 seconds. Then I realized Owen was giving road information. Exit numbers: 5, 3, 1. Interstate exit 531. I told Collins. Police searched possible routes near the facility. There was only one exit 531 within a reasonable distance. Units moved toward it. The caller laughed softly. He knew we understood. He wanted us to follow. The call ended. Police reached exit 531 20 minutes later. They found a vehicle burning beside an abandoned service road. No one was inside. Beyond it, tire tracks continued into the desert. Helicopters searched with thermal cameras. At sunrise, they found 2 people walking near a dry river channel. Owen and Mara. They were alone. Officers reached them by air. Both were dehydrated and exhausted but alive. Aaron and Noah had released them several miles from the burning vehicle. They left no explanation. At the hospital, Owen told us what happened. After being taken through the tunnel beneath his house, he was moved between vehicles and underground rooms. Aaron rarely appeared directly. Most instructions came through speakers. Noah handled transportation. There were other voices, but Owen never saw their faces. Some may have been recordings. Others sounded live. Mara said Noah took her through a maintenance passage beneath the desert facility. Aaron waited in a vehicle outside. She finally saw him clearly. He was older than the man we remembered from Miller Ridge. His beard was almost entirely gray. His face looked thinner, but he wore the same green jacket. She asked why he released them. Aaron told her the purpose had never been to keep us. It was to teach us how easily people could be moved. He said walls, locks, alarms, cameras, and police protection created only the appearance of control. The real control belonged to whoever decided which door came next. Before releasing them, Aaron gave Mara a message for me. He said I had opened door 17. Now I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether there was a door 18. Police searched for Aaron and Noah across several states. They found abandoned vehicles, burned equipment, and empty rooms. They did not find either man. The underground facility was sealed. The investigation became federal. Dozens of agencies reviewed the Vail files, the Mercer disappearances, and unsolved cases linked to remote properties. Several suspects were questioned. No arrests were announced. The official position remains that Aaron Vail leads a small criminal network specializing in surveillance, burglary, stalking, and abduction. Investigators believe some members may have been victims before becoming participants. No one knows how many people belong to the network. No one knows whether Daniel Vail created it intentionally or whether Aaron expanded his father's behavior into something larger. Owen sold his house. Mara left Chicago. The 3 of us no longer live alone. We do not share addresses through email. We avoid remote rentals. We use security systems that operate independently from the internet. We inspect walls, floors, attics, and crawl spaces before moving anywhere. It does not make us feel safe. It only gives us something to do with the fear. For almost 2 years, we received no messages, no photographs, no calls, no packages. The silence was worse than the contact. When Aaron sent something, we knew he was active. When he disappeared, every unexplained noise became a possible beginning. Then last month, a construction crew began renovating the apartment building where I once lived. The building manager contacted me because workers found something inside the wall of my old bedroom. It was not another speaker, it was a door. A narrow metal door had been installed between 2 support beams, It was hidden behind drywall. There was no handle, only a keyhole. Above it, someone had scratched the number 18. The police opened the wall, but could not unlock the door. The hinges faced inward. No construction plans showed a room behind it. The space should have contained only concrete and pipes. Detective Collins called me personally. He said the demolition team was preparing to cut through the metal. I asked him to stop them. He reminded me that evidence might be behind the door. I told him that was exactly why they should stop. Every discovery Aaron allowed us to make had moved us somewhere he wanted. Station 17. The mine. The church. The desert facility. The numbered keys. Door 17. Now door 18 had appeared inside a building I chose before I understood the game. Collins asked what I believed was behind it. I said I did not know. He told me uncertainty was not a reason to leave it closed. I reminded him of Daniel Vale's recording. Doors made people choose. That was the entire point. The person standing outside always believed opening the door would provide an answer, but the answer was never behind it. Only another path, another location, another reason to continue. Collins remained silent for a long time. Then he asked what I wanted him to do. I told him to seal the wall. Do not open it. Do not cut it. Do not place a camera through it. Do not give Aaron the satisfaction of knowing we continued. The police disagreed. A federal team opened door 18 the next morning. The space behind it was only 4 feet deep. There was no tunnel, no hidden room, no body, no person. There was a wooden chair facing the door. On the chair sat a telephone. The telephone began ringing as soon as the door opened. An agent answered. A recorded voice said one sentence. Ethan finally learned not to open it. Then the line disconnected. The phone contained no identifying information. The signal had been routed through multiple networks. The chair had no fingerprints. The metal door had been installed before I moved into the building. Aaron had prepared it years earlier. He never needed me to open door 18. He only needed to prove that someone eventually would. That is where the investigation stands now. Owen believes door 18 was the end. Mara believes there are more. Collins refuses to guess. I try not to think about numbers anymore. But sometimes I enter a hotel and notice the room beside mine is numbered 19. Sometimes an elevator stops on a floor I did not select. Sometimes a locked door stands at the end of a hallway where no room should exist. And every time that happens, I remember the first night at Miller Ridge, the open cabin door, the chair beneath the floor, the muddy boot hidden behind the concrete support. We believed we had discovered someone watching us. The truth was worse. We had stepped into a story that began decades before we arrived. A story built from doors, cameras, voices, and people who vanished between one location and the next. Maybe Aaron is still alive. Maybe Noah has taken his place. Maybe there are others waiting in remote houses, abandoned stations, and underground rooms. Or maybe the entire system finally ended when door 18 opened. I have no way to know. That is what Aaron understood better than anyone. People can survive an attack. They can escape a cabin. They can leave a mountain. They can change homes, names, phone numbers, and entire lives. But uncertainty follows without needing a vehicle. It does not leave footprints. It does not trigger alarms. It does not appear on security cameras. It enters quietly and waits inside your thoughts. And once it is there, you begin opening doors for it. You check the closet. You inspect the wall. You look beneath the bed. You answer the unfamiliar call. You follow the sound of 3 knocks. Most nights there is nothing there, but that does not help, because the one thing I learned from Aaron Vale is that an empty room does not mean no one has been inside. It may only mean they finished preparing it before you arrived. Detective Collins died on a Tuesday morning. 3 nights later he called me. The call came at 2:17 in the morning from a blocked number. I had trained myself not to answer unfamiliar calls, especially after everything that happened with Aaron Vale, Noah Mercer, and the underground facility in Nevada. That night, I answered without understanding why. Maybe some part of me had been waiting for the phone to ring. For several seconds, I heard nothing but wind and uneven breathing. Then Collins whispered my name. I sat upright in bed. My apartment was dark, except for the small lamp I kept burning beside the window. Owen and Mara were asleep in separate rooms down the hall. After the discovery of Door 18, the three of us had decided to stay together temporarily. None of us wanted to be alone. I pressed the phone against my ear and asked who was calling. Collins told me not to say his name. His voice was weak and strained, but I recognized it immediately. I asked whether it was a recording. He told me the body inside his vehicle was not his. Then the call ended. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Detective Aaron Collins had been declared dead 3 days earlier, after his vehicle was discovered burning beside an isolated highway in West Virginia. He had been traveling to meet a federal investigator connected to the Vale case. A truck driver reported seeing smoke near a wooded section of road shortly before sunrise. By the time emergency crews arrived, the vehicle had been completely destroyed. A body was found inside. The damage was severe, but Collins's identification, service weapon, and personal phone were recovered near the driver's seat. The news reached us through Special Agent Rebecca Dane, the federal investigator assigned to the multi-state task force searching for Aaron and the Mercer brothers. She told us identification would require dental records and DNA, but the authorities had no reason to believe anyone other than Collins had been driving. His wife identified several personal items. His department prepared an official statement. A funeral was scheduled for Friday. Now it was Thursday morning, and Collins had called me from somewhere the authorities claimed he could not be. I got out of bed and locked the bedroom door. That reaction may sound strange, considering Owen and Mara were only a few yards away, but fear had taught me not to trust familiar surroundings simply because familiar people were inside them. I checked the closet. I looked beneath the bed. I examined the air vent and the narrow gap behind the curtains. Then I opened my bedroom door and walked down the hallway. Mara slept lightly. She woke as soon as I touched her shoulder. Owen came out of his room a few seconds later, holding the metal flashlight he kept beside his bed. I told them Collins had called. Neither accused me of imagining it. We had passed the point where impossible information surprised us. Mara asked exactly what he said. I repeated the words. The body inside his vehicle was not his. Owen asked whether the voice could have been generated from recordings. It was possible. The network had used copied voices before. They had imitated Owen outside Miller Ridge. They had spoofed his phone number. They had used recordings to guide us through tunnels, storage facilities, and underground rooms. But the call did not sound like the clean recordings used before. Collins coughed. His breathing changed while he spoke. Wind moved across the microphone. It sounded live. Mara asked whether the call could be traced. The number was blocked, but our phones were monitored by the task force. Every call was automatically recorded and logged. That created another problem. If Collins was hiding from someone inside the investigation, the call had just been delivered directly to them. Owen reached for his phone. I stopped him before he contacted Agent Dane. Collins had told me not to say his name. That warning was probably more important than the message itself. Someone believed he was dead. He wanted it to remain that way. We switched off our phones and placed them inside a metal lockbox Owen had purchased to block signals. Then we sat around the kitchen table and tried to decide what to do. The safe and responsible option was to contact Agent Dane immediately. But safe and responsible options had repeatedly led us into places Aaron had prepared. Police opened door 18 after I told them not to. Federal officers followed the sequence of numbered keys into the Nevada facility. Noah Mercer entered that operation wearing a stolen uniform. Every official plan seemed to reach the network before it was carried out. Collins may have discovered the source of that leak. That could explain why his vehicle was attacked. Mara reminded us that the call itself could be a trap designed to separate us from federal protection. Aaron understood our trust in Collins. Using his voice after his death would force us to act emotionally. Owen said there was only one way to test it. Before Collins died, the four of us had agreed on an emergency verification phrase. It was created after the fake deputy stood outside Miller Ridge and used the real officer's name. The phrase was never written down. Collins would ask a question. What did the fire leave behind? The correct answer was the chair. The caller had not asked the question. I had not given the answer. We had no proof it was Collins. At 3:12, the apartment intercom buzzed. The sound made all three of us jump. No one should have been entering the building at that hour. The front desk attendant called through the intercom and said a courier had delivered an envelope for me. We watched the lobby cameras from Owen's tablet. A young delivery driver stood near the front doors. He wore a reflective jacket and kept looking toward the street. The attendant held a plain brown envelope. There was no return address. The driver left before police could be contacted. We asked the attendant to place the envelope inside a plastic bag and leave it behind the desk. At sunrise, Agent Dane arrived with 2 federal officers. We told her about the delivery, but not the call. She examined us closely. Dane was in her early 40s. With dark hair she usually wore tied behind her head. She had managed the task force since the Nevada facility was discovered. Unlike Collins, she rarely discussed theories. She preferred evidence, timelines, and direct answers. That morning, she looked exhausted. Collins's death had affected her more than she admitted. The federal officers photographed the envelope and opened it inside a protective container. It contained a motel keycard and a photograph. The photograph showed Collins standing beside his burned vehicle. He was alive. He faced the camera with one hand raised toward the lens. Blood covered the side of his face. Behind him, another man sat unconscious against the rear tire. The picture had been taken before the fire. On the back, someone had written an address and a time. Friday, 1:40 in the afternoon. The time was 20 minutes before Collins's funeral. Agent Dane asked whether we had received anything else. For 1 second, I considered telling her about the call. Mara answered before I could. She said no. Dane looked at each of us. She knew we were hiding something. But she did not push. The address belonged to a motel approximately 30 miles outside Columbus. The key card had no printed room number. Dane took the photograph and card as evidence. She instructed us to remain inside the apartment while agents searched the motel. We agreed. Then we watched her leave. The moment the elevator doors closed, Owen said we could not allow the task force to reach the motel first. If Collins was hiding there, an official search could expose him. If the network was waiting there, the authorities might walk directly into an ambush. Mara said the handwritten time was the important detail. The sender wanted something to happen during the funeral. The motel address might be a distraction, or the funeral might be. We needed more information. I remembered something Collins said during our last conversation before his death. He had called me after door 18 was opened. We discussed the telephone, the wooden chair, and Aaron's recorded message. Before ending the call, Collins told me he was keeping a private copy of certain evidence. He said, large investigations created large circles of trust, and large circles always developed gaps. At the time, I thought he was being cautious. Now I believed he had suspected someone inside the task force. We searched our old messages from Collins. Most contained ordinary updates. One message, sent 2 weeks earlier, included a photograph of a coffee shop receipt. I assumed he had sent it accidentally and ignored it. Mara examined the image. The receipt came from a cafe in downtown Columbus. The order number was 19. Collins had circled it with a pen. Below it, he had written that the coffee was stored in the wrong place. It did not sound like an accidental message. We drove to the cafe without our phones. Owen parked several blocks away, while Mara and I entered separately. The shop was crowded with office workers. No one appeared to notice us. I ordered coffee and asked whether they offered storage lockers or package pickup. The employee pointed toward a row of small rental boxes inside the neighboring train station. The station had once served passenger trains, but was now used as a bus terminal and commercial space. There were 24-hour lockers near the lower entrance. Locker 19 opened with a numerical code. The receipt displayed a time of 11:47. We entered those digits. The door clicked open. Inside was a black backpack. It belonged to Collins. The first recognized it from several meetings. We carried it to a restroom stall before opening it. The backpack contained a notebook, a portable hard drive, 3 prepaid phones, an envelope addressed to his wife, and a small digital recorder. There was also a key attached to a metal tag. The tag read, Cabin 19. Mara opened the notebook. The first page contained one sentence. If I am officially dead, assume the task force has been compromised. The following pages documented information Collins had collected during the previous 6 months. Dates of planned searches, names of officers assigned to each operation, times when suspects or equipment disappeared shortly before police arrived. The pattern was consistent. Whenever the task force prepared to search a major location, someone reached it between 11 and 17 minutes ahead of them. At Miller Ridge, the stranger fled before the first deputy reached the clearing. At Station 17, the underground room had been abandoned shortly before officers entered. At the hidden structure near the mine, the bed was still warm. At the stone church, recently used equipment had been removed. At the lake house, cameras were active, but no suspect remained. At Owens, Arizona house, a vehicle waited beyond the tunnel. At the Nevada facility, Noah Mercer entered wearing a uniform taken from an officer who had been attacked outside the perimeter. Someone had access to live operational information. Collins initially suspected the federal communication system. Then he created a test. He selected 19 people involved in the investigation. To each person, he quietly provided a different false location where Aaron was supposedly hiding. None of the locations were real. Collins monitored all 19. At 18 locations, nothing happened. At the 19th, a camera recorded a man arriving shortly after midnight. The man wore a dark baseball cap and green jacket. He searched the empty building for 13 minutes and then left. Only one member of the task force had received that address. Special Agent Rebecca Dane. Owen read the name twice. Mara took the digital recorder from the backpack and pressed play. Collins's voice filled the restroom stall. He explained that Agent Dane might be working with Aaron, but he had not confronted her because the leak could extend beyond one person. The false address test was not enough to prove she personally passed the information. Her phone, computer, vehicle, or office could have been monitored. Another member of the task force could have accessed her files. Collins planned a second test. Before he could complete it, he was attacked. The recording ended with a warning. Do not assume the person helping Aaron knows they are helping him. The final notebook pages contained diagrams of a tracking system discovered inside federal case files. Every digital photograph uploaded to the task force database was automatically copied to an external server before forensic processing. The server had been registered to a private evidence management company called Meridian Archive Services. The federal government contracted Meridian to store large media files from multi-state investigations. The company handled photographs, body camera footage, audio files, scanned notebooks, and recovered hard drives. Meridian had access to almost everything, including the Miller Ridge evidence, the copied voices, the pictures of our homes, the private labels used in Aaron's notebooks, the location of our protective hotels, the discovery of Door 18. If someone inside Meridian worked with the network, they did not need an agent inside every operation. They only needed access to the evidence system. Mara examined the key marked Cabin 19. The notebook contained an address beside that phrase. It belonged to an abandoned newspaper printing facility outside Columbus. Collins had rented a secure room there under a false company name. He stored physical evidence that had never been entered into the federal database. We left the station through separate exits. Before returning to the car, I used one of Collins's prepaid phones to call the number that contacted me during the night. The line rang once. Then Collins answered. I asked the verification question. What did the fire leave behind? He breathed slowly. Then he said the chair. It was him. I asked where he was. He said he could not tell me over the phone. I told him we found the backpack. He said cabin 19 had already been opened. Then the connection failed. We drove toward the printing facility. The building stood near an industrial section of the city, beside railroad tracks and empty warehouses. Most of its windows had been broken or covered with metal panels. A faded newspaper logo remained above the loading dock. Owen parked behind an abandoned trucking office. We approached on foot. The key opened a side entrance. Inside, the building smelled of dust, rust, and wet paper. Large printing machines stood beneath hanging chains. Rolls of yellowed paper lay scattered across the floor. The power had been disconnected, but narrow beams of daylight entered through holes in the roof. Collins's notebook directed us toward the basement. We found a locked steel door marked mechanical storage. The cabin 19 key opened it. A stairwell descended into darkness. Owen switched on his flashlight. At the bottom was a concrete hallway with 3 doors. The first room contained filing cabinets. The second contained shelves of evidence boxes. The third contained a desk, several monitors, and a folding bed. Collins had built a private investigation room. Maps covered the walls. Photographs of locations connected to Aaron were arranged by date. Lines of thread connected the Vales, the Mercer family, missing renters, abandoned fire stations, storage units, and federal contractors. One wall was devoted entirely to Meridian Archive Services. The company appeared legitimate. It had offices in 6 states and held contracts with police departments, courts, insurance companies, and private security firms. But Collins had discovered that Meridian had changed ownership several times. Each new owner was connected to another shell company. The earliest company in the chain had been registered in 1991 by Daniel Vale, Aaron's father. The network had not simply hidden cameras in cabins. It had entered the systems responsible for storing evidence about those cameras. Every time police discovered something, copies may have gone directly back to Aaron. The investigation was feeding him. A monitor on the desk was still on. The screen displayed a live camera feed from Collins's funeral home. Rows of empty chairs faced a closed casket. Workers arranged flowers near the front. Another feed showed the parking lot. A third showed the road leading toward the building. Collins had placed cameras there. He expected someone to attend. Mara checked the computer. One folder contained 19 video feeds. Each feed showed a person involved with the task force: Agent Dane, forensic technicians, local detectives, federal analysts, a communications supervisor, 2 employees from Meridian, and us. The final feed showed our apartment kitchen. It was empty. Collins had been watching everyone. Owen stepped away from the screen. He said Collins was doing the same thing as Aaron. Mara argued that Collins was trying to identify the leak. Owen said every watcher believed they had a reason. Before we could continue, movement appeared on the funeral home feed. Agent Dane entered the building. She wore black and carried a folder beneath one arm. Several officers followed her. Collins's wife arrived shortly afterward. She looked exhausted. Watching her prepare to bury a man who was still alive felt wrong. I called Collins again. He answered, but spoke quietly. He told us not to interfere with the funeral. It was the second test. Only Dane had received the motel address, but all 19 suspects had received different instructions connected to the funeral. Each person had been told that a private evidence item would be transferred during the service. The details varied: different entrance, different vehicle, different container, different time. Collins planned to watch which false detail attracted the network. I asked how he survived the attack. He said someone forced his vehicle off the road. He woke inside another car, with his wrists restrained. 2 people were transporting him. One wore a Meridian security uniform. Collins managed to free one hand and caused the vehicle to crash near a drainage ditch. He escaped into the trees. The attackers recovered his car, placed another body inside, and set it on fire. Collins did not know whose body they used. He believed the dead man may have been one of their own. He stayed hidden because the network controlled enough information to find him through official channels. The motel photograph had not come from Collins. Someone else knew he survived. I asked whether he was injured. He said he had been better. Then the funeral home feed changed. A black delivery van entered the parking lot. According to Collins's notes, only one person had been told that evidence would arrive in a black van. A Meridian Archive employee named Patrick Sloan. He had access to every digital file uploaded by the task force. Collins told us to record everything. The van parked near the service entrance. 2 men stepped out wearing dark uniforms. They carried a silver equipment case. Agent Dane moved toward the rear hallway, apparently responding to a radio message. The men entered through the service door. On another camera, they placed the case beneath a preparation table. Then they left. 3 minutes later, Sloan entered the funeral home. He did not attend the service area. He walked directly toward the preparation room. Collins had his answer. Patrick Sloan was connected to the leak. But the test was not finished. Sloan opened the silver case. Inside was a small electronic device. He attached room. Mara enlarged the image. It looked like a network transmitter. The device began scanning nearby frequencies. Sloan expected physical evidence to be transferred during the funeral. He wanted to identify or copy any electronic tags attached to it. The black van had not delivered the device. It had delivered surveillance equipment to detect the evidence. Agent Dane returned to the service area. Nothing in her behavior suggested she knew what was happening. Her false location may have leaked through the Meridian system. Collins had uploaded it as part of an official report. That cleared Dane, at least temporarily. We watched Sloan leave the funeral home. A camera across the street captured him, entering a gray sedan. Collins told us to remain where we were. Federal officers loyal to him were following Sloan without using official communication channels. If the network checked task force records, it would see no active operation. For the first time, they might follow a member without warning him. The gray sedan traveled east. The surveillance team followed from a distance. We watched through a secure map on Collins's computer. After 20 minutes, Sloan turned toward the motel address, written on the back of Collins's photograph. He parked outside room 19. The keycard in our envelope must have belonged to that room. Sloan knocked 3 times. The door opened. No camera showed who stood inside. Sloan entered. Collins ordered the surveillance team to wait. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At 12 minutes, the room curtains closed. At 15 minutes, the gray sedan exploded. The blast destroyed the vehicle and shattered several motel windows. The surveillance team approached immediately. Room 19 was empty. The rear window stood open. A maintenance panel inside the bathroom had been removed. Behind it was an access tunnel containing plumbing and electrical lines. The tunnel connected to another room on the opposite side of the building. That room had been rented under a false name. Sloan was gone. The person who sent the photograph had used the funeral test to identify Collins's method. They knew he would follow the leak. They had prepared the motel before the operation began. Collins told us to leave cabin 19 immediately. Someone had probably allowed us to find the backpack. I looked toward the live feed of our apartment. A person now stood in the kitchen. The figure wore a black coat and baseball cap. We could not see the face. Mara whispered that the building's security should have prevented anyone from entering. Owen said security had never prevented them before. The figure placed something on the table, then looked directly at the hidden camera. It raised one hand and pointed toward the ceiling. A second person dropped from the open maintenance panel above Collins's basement room. The man landed behind Owen. I shouted a warning. Owen turned as the intruder struck him with a metal bar. He fell against the desk. Mara swung the flashlight, hitting the man across the side of the head. He stumbled. I grabbed the nearest chair and pushed it between us. The intruder wore a respirator mask and dark work clothes. He recovered quickly and reached inside his jacket. A gun appeared in his hand. Then a shot exploded through the room. The man collapsed. Detective Collins stood in the doorway. Blood had soaked through the sleeve of his coat. One side of his face was bruised and cut. He held a handgun with both hands. For several seconds, none of us moved. Collins approached the intruder and kicked the weapon away. The man was alive but seriously injured. Collins removed the mask. We did not recognize him. His left ear carried a thin scar running toward the jaw. Mara stared. He resembled Noah Mercer, but he was older. The man from the gas station footage had been about 30. This person looked closer to 40. Collins checked his pockets. He found several identification cards with different names. None appeared genuine. One card belonged to Meridian Archive Services. The name printed beneath the photograph was Caleb Mercer, the older Mercer brother. Police believed Caleb disappeared with Noah after their parents vanished. Now we had found him. Caleb opened his eyes. He looked at Mara, then he smiled. He said Owen had always been too focused on the cameras. Collins asked where Noah and Aaron were. Caleb laughed softly. He said Aaron was not a person. Then he lost consciousness. Emergency officers loyal to Collins arrived through the side entrance. They transported Caleb to a secure hospital under armed guard. Owen's injury was painful but not life-threatening. He had a cut above one eye and a possible concussion. Collins refused medical treatment until we left the printing facility. We gathered the hard drive, notebook, and physical evidence. Before leaving, Mara checked the object placed on our apartment table. The camera feed showed a large brown envelope. Our names had been written across it. The person in the kitchen disappeared before local police entered the building. There were no signs of forced entry. The ceiling maintenance panel was open. The access space connected several apartments and utility rooms. Police secured the envelope. Inside were 3 employee identification cards from Meridian Archive Services. Each card carried one of our photographs. My card identified me as an evidence intake specialist. Mara was listed as a visual media technician. Owen was listed as a security systems analyst. The issue dates were from 5 years before the Miller Ridge trip. None of us had ever worked for Meridian. The cards were authentic. Company records showed employee accounts under our names. Those accounts had accessed rental information, police evidence, and surveillance files for years. Someone had created digital versions of us before we knew the company existed. If investigators searched the records, it would appear that we had participated in the network. Our names could be connected to every leaked photograph and compromised operation. The network was preparing to turn us from victims into suspects. Collins understood immediately. If federal investigators discovered the accounts without context, we would be arrested. Any denial would sound convenient. The Vale case already depended on unbelievable stories involving copied voices, hidden tunnels, staged deaths, and numbered doors. Now computer records showed us working for the company that stored the evidence. Collins said we could not return to the apartment. We could not contact the main task force until Patrick Sloan and the Meridian system were contained. Every official channel was dangerous. We moved to an unused county emergency facility outside the city. Only 4 people knew the location. Collins, Agent Dane, a federal cybercrime specialist named Lewis Grant, and the local sheriff responsible for the building. Collins finally allowed a medic to treat his injuries. He had suffered 2 broken ribs, a deep cut along his shoulder, and signs of dehydration. The body found in his car was still unidentified. Dental records had been damaged. DNA testing was delayed because the sample had been contaminated. Collins believed Meridian had influenced the identification process. The company stored digital dental scans for several departments. If they replaced or altered records, they could make almost any damaged body appear to belong to someone else. Agent Dane arrived after dark. When Collins stepped into the hallway, she stared at him for several seconds. Then she struck him across the face. He accepted it without complaint. Dane was angry because his family believed he was dead. His wife had spent the day sitting beside an empty casket. Collins said contacting her would have exposed her. Dane told him he had no right to make that decision alone. Their argument ended when Lewis Grant connected to the Meridian servers. Grant was a thin man in his 50s who wore thick glasses and spoke as though he expected every computer to betray him. He had worked with Collins quietly for several weeks. Using the private hard drive, Grant compared federal case files with data copied to Meridian. The employee accounts under our names were only part of a larger system. Hundreds of false identities existed inside the company. Some belonged to missing people. Some belonged to police officers. Some belonged to ordinary citizens who had once stayed at remote rental properties. The accounts formed layers. If one identity was discovered, the records pointed toward another victim. Aaron's network had created a system where evidence never led directly to them. It led in circles through people they had watched. Grant opened a directory hidden inside the Meridian database. The folder was labeled Cabins. It contained numbered subfolders. Cabin 1 through Cabin 18 matched locations or groups already connected to the investigation. Station 17, Miller Ridge, the Church Archive, the Nevada Facility, the Mercer family, our apartments, the Federal Task Force. Cabin 19 contained the 19 people Collins tested for leaks. The task force itself was being treated as another group under observation. There were more folders. Cabin 20, Cabin 21, Cabin 22. The numbering had never ended at door 18. Aaron's message only made us believe it had. Most folders were encrypted. Grant managed to open Cabin 20. It contained photographs of Patrick Sloan. Sloan had not joined the network willingly. The images showed him meeting his daughter outside of school. Another showed the girl walking through a parking lot. A third showed someone standing outside her bedroom window. Attached messages ordered Sloan to copy specific task force files. He had been threatened. That explained Collins's warning. Do not assume the person helping Aaron knows they are helping him. Sloan was a leak, but he might also be a victim. Cabin 21 contained images of Agent Dane, pictures of her home, her office, her mother's assisted living facility. Her file included recorded phone calls and copies of private medical documents. The network had been preparing leverage against her. Dane stared at the screen without speaking. Grant opened Cabin 22. The folder was empty except for a live video feed. It showed the emergency facility where we were hiding. The camera looked down from the corner of the room. All of us appeared on screen. Collins drew his weapon and searched the ceiling. The camera was hidden inside a smoke detector. The building had supposedly been secure. Only 4 people knew we were there. Someone had installed the camera before our arrival. The live feed contained a viewer count. 117 people were watching. Aaron's network was not a small group. At least 117 devices were connected. Some viewers may have been automated systems, but many appeared active. Messages began appearing beside the video. Some asked whether Collins was really alive. Others commented on Mara's camera. Someone wrote that Owen looked different without the desert behind him. Another message asked when the quiet one would open the next door. We were being watched by an audience. The horror stories, the recordings, the numbered rooms, and the staged clues were not created only for Aaron. They were entertainment for a hidden community. People watched selected groups the way others watched reality television. They discussed us. They chose favorites. They predicted who would panic first. They voted on which sound should play outside the cabin. Grant copied the messages before shutting down the network connection. The screen went black. A second later, every light in the building failed. Emergency power activated. Red lights filled the hallway. A phone began ringing inside the locked evidence room. No one had placed a phone there. Collins and Dane entered with weapons drawn. On the floor beneath a wooden chair sat an old landline telephone. It rang 3 times, then stopped. A printer beside Grant's computer activated. One sheet of paper emerged. It contained a list of names. Our names appeared near the top. Collins, Dane, Grant, Owen, Mara, Ethan. Below us were more than 100 names. Some belonged to people connected to missing person cases. Some belonged to investigators. Others were unfamiliar. At the bottom of the page was one sentence. Everyone watching is also being watched. Grant said the connected viewers may not have been members of the network. They could have been targets. Aaron may have given them access to other cabins while secretly collecting information about them. The watchers became participants. The participants became evidence. The system turned curiosity into control. Anyone who watched could later be threatened with what they had seen or done. Aaron was not simply building a group. He was building a chain of compromised people. Caleb Mercer regained consciousness at the hospital shortly before midnight. Collins and Dane questioned him through a secure video connection. Caleb refused to discuss Aaron. He only repeated that Aaron was not a person. Dane asked whether Aaron was a title. Caleb smiled. He said Aaron was the person outside the door. Collins asked what that meant. Caleb explained that Daniel Vale used the name Aaron when speaking to people he watched. The real Aaron was his son. But Daniel also called himself Aaron through radios and written messages. After Daniel died, the name continued. Anyone directing a cabin could become Aaron. Noah had been Aaron. Caleb had been Aaron. Patrick Sloan may have been forced to act as Aaron. Viewers could become Aaron if they selected what happened next. The network survived because investigators searched for one man. There was no single man. There was a role, a voice, a person outside the door deciding whether to knock. Collins asked who was directing our cabin now. Caleb looked toward the camera. He said the quiet one was. I felt everyone turn toward me. I told him I was not directing anything. Caleb said every decision I made continued the story. I opened the numbered door. I followed the keys. I entered the desert facility. I asked police to investigate Meridian. I answered Collins's call. Each decision moved the cabin forward. Aaron did not need to control every event. He only needed to understand which choice I would make. Caleb began coughing. The hospital monitor beside him sounded an alarm. A nurse entered the room. Then the video feed froze. Dane contacted the security team. No one answered. The hospital cameras showed repeating images, the same technique used at Owen's house and Mara's studio. By the time officers reached Caleb's room, he was gone. The nurse was unconscious inside a supply closet. A ceiling panel stood open. Caleb had been injured, handcuffed, and surrounded by armed guards. He still disappeared, or someone inside the hospital helped him leave. We abandoned the emergency facility before sunrise. Grant took the Meridian server copies offline. Collins sent his family a private verification message proving he was alive, but he could not return home. Dane quietly replaced several task force officials and suspended Meridian's access to federal systems. Publicly, Collins remained dead. His funeral proceeded with an empty casket. Patrick Sloan was located 2 days later inside an abandoned rental house in Indiana. He was alive. His hands had been tied to a chair. A speaker beside him played the sound of his daughter crying. The recording was fake. His daughter had already been moved into protective custody. Sloan admitted copying evidence for the network, but he did not know who gave the orders. Instructions arrived through the Meridian system. Sometimes the messages included photographs taken only minutes earlier. He believed refusing would endanger his family. When asked about the black delivery van at the funeral, he said he had been ordered to enter Motel Room 19. Inside, a masked person instructed him to leave through the maintenance tunnel. The explosion destroyed records in his vehicle that could connect Meridian to the network. Sloan never saw the person's face. Grant examined Cabin 23. It contained live information about Sloan's protective location. Someone still had access to government systems even after Meridian was disconnected. The leak extended beyond the company. Cabin 24 contained Collins's family. Cabin 25 contained Grant. Cabin 26 contained a local judge. The folders continued into the hundreds. Each cabin represented a person, family, investigation, or group placed under observation. Some had existed for decades, others had been created recently. Then Grant found a folder that did not follow the numbering system. It was labeled Original Cabin. The creation date was 1984, 2 years before Russell disappeared at Station 17. The folder contained scanned photographs. The first showed Daniel Vale standing outside an unfinished house. He was younger, without gray in his hair. Beside him stood several construction workers. One of those workers looked familiar. I enlarged the photograph. My hands began trembling. The man beside Daniel was my father. I had not seen him in years. He died when I was 9 years old. The official cause was a workplace accident. He fell from the roof of an unfinished commercial building outside Columbus. At least, that was what my mother told me. In the photograph, my father held a set of building plans. Daniel pointed toward a rectangular opening in the foundation. A wooden chair sat nearby. Another photograph showed the same house after construction. The front looked ordinary. Behind the garage, workers had installed a narrow metal door beneath the ground. The number 0 had been painted above it. The final photograph showed a young woman standing outside the completed house. She held a child in her arms. The woman was my mother. The child was me. The picture had been taken through a window. Attached to the photograph was a scanned notebook page, written in Daniel Vale's handwriting. The builder found the lower room. He wants it sealed. The wife does not know. The child watches doors. Below that, someone else had added a sentence many years later. The son finally reached Miller Ridge. Mara asked whether I remembered the house. I told her no. My family moved several times when I was young. My mother rarely spoke about my father's construction work. After he died, she destroyed most of his papers. I always assumed grief made her want to remove reminders. Now I wondered whether she had been hiding something. Grant searched property records using the house photographs. The address belonged to a rural property outside Athens, Ohio. The house still existed. It had changed owners 4 times. The current residents were a retired couple. Nothing in the records mentioned an underground room. Collins told us not to contact my mother until we understood more. But the original cabin folder contained her current address. The network already knew where she lived. I called her using a secure phone. She answered after several rings. I asked whether she remembered Daniel Vale. She became silent. Then she asked where I heard that name. I told her about the photograph. My mother began crying. She said my father had worked with Daniel on several remote building projects. At first, Daniel presented himself as a forestry contractor. He paid in cash and asked workers to construct storage spaces beneath cabins, stations, and private homes. The rooms were supposed to hold emergency supplies. My father later discovered wiring, cameras, and recording equipment inside one of them. He confronted Daniel. After that, strange things began happening around our house. Objects moved. The telephone rang without anyone speaking. My father heard footsteps beneath the floor. One night he found a wooden chair in the basement facing the stairs. My parents moved. Daniel found them again. They moved a second time. Then my father died. My mother never believed it was an accident. Before his death, he told her that if anything happened, she should never allow me to enter the house near Athens. I asked why. She said the underground room was built beneath it. The first room my father helped Daniel construct. Door 0, the original cabin. My father tried to seal it before we moved. He believed he succeeded, but several weeks after his funeral, my mother received a photograph. It showed me asleep in my bedroom. On the back, someone had written that doors could be reopened. She changed our names temporarily and moved us again. She never told me because she believed the network had forgotten us. Then I rented Miller Ridge with Owen and Mara. It was not random. Aaron did not select us because Mara clicked a false email. The email was sent because my name appeared on the booking. They had been waiting for me to enter one of their properties. Miller Ridge was not the beginning. It was the moment the original cabin reopened. Collins asked my mother whether she still possessed my father's papers. She said she kept one box inside a bank deposit vault. The box contained photographs, building plans, and a key. The key was marked with the number 0. We arranged to meet her at the bank under police protection. Before we could leave, Grant's computer displayed a notification. The live feed from our apartment had returned. The brown envelope still sat on the kitchen table. The person in the black coat stood beside it again. This time, the figure removed the baseball cap. It was a woman. She appeared to be in her 60s. I recognized her before she looked toward the camera. My mother. She stood inside the apartment while I was speaking to her on the phone. I looked down at the secure device in my hand. The call was still connected. My mother's voice asked whether I was there. On the screen, the woman raised a phone to her ear. The movements matched the voice. She was not at her home. She had entered our apartment. I asked how she got inside. She said she used the route she had been told to use, the ceiling maintenance passage. My mother had known about it. She had known enough to avoid cameras and security. Collins raised his weapon toward the monitor, as though the screen itself were dangerous. I asked my mother, who gave her instructions. She looked directly into the hidden camera. Then she said my father was not dead. The room became completely silent. I told her that was impossible. She said the body from the construction accident had been badly damaged. Identification depended on dental records, the same kind of records Meridian could alter. My father disappeared because he believed it was the only way to protect us. For years, he worked from inside the network, trying to identify its rooms and members. He sent my mother warnings. He told her when to move. He told her which doors to avoid. Then, 18 months earlier, the warnings stopped. Around the same time, Mara found the Miller Ridge rental. My mother believed Aaron had finally found him. The brown envelope on the table contained the last message my father sent. She had been instructed to deliver it only after I discovered the original cabin folder. I asked who instructed her. She said the message came from my father. It arrived that morning. Someone had placed it inside her locked house. The envelope contained a photograph. My mother held it toward the apartment camera. The image showed a man sitting in a wooden chair inside an unfinished underground room. His hair was gray. His face was thin. But I recognized him. My father was alive. He held a sign against his chest. The sign contained 4 words. Ethan, do not open 0. Behind him stood a metal door. The number 0 had been painted above it. A second person stood partially outside the photograph. Only one arm was visible. The sleeve belonged to a faded green jacket. My mother lowered the picture. Then, every camera feed went black. The secure phone disconnected. We tried calling her again. No answer. Police entered the apartment less than 3 minutes later. The rooms were empty. My mother was gone. The envelope remained on the table. The photograph was inside. So was the key, marked 0. On the back of the photograph, someone had written an address. The house outside Athens. The original cabin. Collins told me it was a trap. Dane agreed. Owen said that was obvious. Mara asked whether knowing it was a trap had ever stopped us before. No one answered. Because somewhere beneath a house I could not remember, my father may have been sitting behind the first door Daniel Vale ever built. My mother had disappeared after delivering the key. The network had connected my childhood to every cabin, tunnel, camera, and numbered room that followed. Aaron was not waiting for us to find another clue. He was waiting for me to return to where the story began. I held the key in my hand. It was old and dark, worn smooth along the edges. For most of my life, I believed my father died in an accident. I believed Miller Ridge was a random vacation. I believed Aaron selected us because we entered the wrong cabin. Now I understood that I had never accidentally entered his story. I had been born inside it. The cabin beneath Miller Ridge, the chair under Owen's house, door 18, the desert facility, the Meridian files. Every path led backward toward the same hidden room, door 0. Collins asked what I intended to do. I looked at the photograph of my father. Then I looked at the key. I knew what Aaron wanted. He wanted me to open the first door. He wanted the original cabin to become active again. He wanted every person watching to see whether the son would repeat the father's choice. The intelligent decision was to destroy the key, seal the house, walk away. But Aaron understood something about me long before I understood it myself. Uncertainty always opened the door eventually, and this time the person waiting behind it knew my name before I was old enough to speak. We reached the house outside Athens shortly after midnight. It stood at the end of a narrow county road, surrounded by bare trees and overgrown fields. From the outside, it looked ordinary. 2 stories, white siding, a detached garage, a porch with a single light burning above the front door. Nothing about it suggested that my father had helped build a hidden room beneath it. Nothing suggested that Daniel Vale had once stood inside its unfinished foundation. Nothing suggested that the first door in a 40-year system of surveillance, blackmail, disappearances, and murder was buried somewhere below the floor. The retired couple who owned the house had been quietly removed earlier that evening. Agent Dane told them there was a possible gas leak beneath the foundation. They were taken to a hotel under police protection without being told the real reason. The road had been blocked in both directions. Federal agents waited in unmarked vehicles beyond the tree line. A tactical team had entered the neighboring fields on foot and established a perimeter almost half a mile wide. No official radios were being used. No locations had been entered into the main federal evidence system. Lewis Grant had created a temporary closed network that did not connect to Meridian or any government server. Only 7 people knew the operation was happening: Collins, Dane, Grant, Owen, Mara, me, and my mother, wherever she was. The photograph she delivered to our apartment showed my father sitting in a wooden chair behind a metal door marked with the number 0. The address on the back led here. My father had been officially dead for more than 20 years. My mother disappeared after delivering the key. We had every reason to believe the house was a trap. We went inside anyway. The front door was unlocked. That detail bothered me more than it should have. After everything we had experienced, an open door no longer felt welcoming. It felt deliberate. Collins entered first, with his handgun raised. Dane followed him. Owen carried a flashlight and a short metal bar. Mara held her camera, but had removed its memory card and disabled every wireless feature. I carried the key marked 0. The inside of the house had been remodeled several times. The furniture belonged to the current owners. Family photographs covered the walls. A clock ticked in the living room. For a few seconds I wondered whether we had made a mistake. Maybe the house in Daniel's photograph only resembled this one. Then I saw the doorway leading into the kitchen. A memory returned without warning. I was 4 or 5 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor while my father worked beneath the sink. My mother stood near the back door, arguing with someone outside. I could not remember the words. I remembered the man's jacket, green. I stopped walking. Mara asked what was wrong. I told her I had been inside the house before. The memory felt incomplete, like a photograph damaged by water. I could see the kitchen floor and my father's boots. I could hear my mother's voice. I remembered holding a small metal object in my hand. A key. My father took it from me and told me that some doors were safer when they remained locked. I had believed the memory belonged to another house. Now I knew it happened here. We found the basement stairs behind the kitchen. The door at the top was newer than the surrounding wall. Collins opened it slowly. Cold air moved upward. The basement smelled of concrete, old wood, and damp soil. Shelves filled with paint cans and storage boxes lined one wall. A washer and dryer stood near a utility sink. Everything appeared normal. Grant examined the original building plans. According to the measurements, The basement ended 12 feet sooner than the exterior foundation. There was a room behind the eastern wall. The current owners had never known it existed. We moved the shelves. Behind them, a section of concrete had been covered with thin wood paneling and painted the same color as the wall. Owen inserted the metal bar into the edge. The paneling pulled away easily. A narrow metal door stood behind it. The number 0 had been painted above the frame. The paint was old and cracked. At the center was a dark keyhole. My hand shook as I inserted the key. Collins told everyone to stand back. I turned it. The lock released with a heavy mechanical click. No alarm sounded. No light appeared. The door opened inward. Behind it was a concrete stairwell, descending farther underground. Someone had recently cleaned the steps. There was no dust. A cable ran along the ceiling, carrying electricity into the darkness. Grant checked the signal detector. Electronic activity was coming from below. Cameras, transmitters, possibly computers. Someone knew we were standing at door 0. Collins asked whether I was ready. I told him no. Then I started down the stairs. The passage beneath the house was older than the basement. Some sections had been cut directly through stone. Others were reinforced with concrete and steel supports. The stairs ended at a narrow hallway. On the wall beside us were small handprints pressed into dried cement. Most belonged to children. Dates had been written beneath them: 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988. Some included names: Aaron, Caleb, Noah. Others contained only numbers. Mara photographed the wall. Owen stared at the child-sized prints. Daniel had not built the network, using only adults. Children had grown up inside it. Some may have been his family. Others may have been taken from the cabins he watched. The Mercer brothers might not have been the first. A speaker mounted near the ceiling activated. A man's voice welcomed me home. It was the voice from Miller Ridge, the older man in the green jacket. I had heard recordings, imitations, and distorted messages for years. This voice was real. Aaron Vale was somewhere beneath the house. Collins raised his weapon toward the speaker. Aaron said, "Weapons would not be necessary if we followed the hallway." Dane ordered him to release my parents. He laughed softly. Then, he said my father had not been a prisoner until we arrived. That sentence stayed in my mind as we continued. The hallway ended at a large underground chamber. Dozens of wooden chairs had been arranged in rows, facing a wall of television screens. Every screen displayed a different location: rental cabins, hotel rooms, parking lots, apartment hallways, hospital rooms, police offices, homes. Some feeds were empty. Others showed people moving through their ordinary lives without knowing they were being watched. A family ate dinner. A woman slept beside a television. A man worked alone in a garage. A child sat at a desk doing homework. At the bottom of every screen was a number: Cabin 32, Cabin 58, Cabin 104, Cabin 117. The network had never been limited to the locations we discovered. There were hundreds, maybe thousands. At the center screen, my mother sat in a chair. Her hands were tied in front of her. She appeared frightened, but conscious. Behind her stood the metal door from the photograph. Door 0. The image was live. A second camera angle showed my father sitting several feet away. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was almost completely gray. His face was thin. A scar crossed the left side of his forehead. But it was him. I recognized the way he held his shoulders. I recognized his hands. He looked directly into the camera. Then he shook his head once. "Do not continue." A metal door closed behind us. The lock engaged. Collins immediately tried his radio. There was no response. Grant's closed network had been blocked. The tactical teams outside could no longer hear us. Aaron's voice came through the room. He said we had spent years asking the wrong question. We wanted to know who was watching. We wanted one name, one face, one person to blame: Daniel Vale, Aaron Vale, Caleb Mercer, Noah Mercer, Patrick Sloan. Each discovery made us believe we were closer to the center, but the network had no center. It had a first room. A room where Daniel learned that people behaved differently when they believed no one could see them. He began with workers, then travelers, then families. He recorded secrets and used those secrets to recruit help. A man who stole from his employer could be forced to place a camera. A police officer having an affair could be forced to change a report. A frightened parent could be forced to copy evidence. A teenager who watched illegal recordings could be forced to install equipment. Every watcher eventually became watched. Every participant became another door. Daniel called the system Aaron, after his son, because he believed a name was more powerful than a company. Companies could be investigated, people could be arrested, but a name could move. A name could belong to anyone. When Daniel died, the name continued. Aaron Vale had been real. He was also a role. The man who stopped us on the road at Miller Ridge was the original Aaron. The person beneath the floor was Noah Mercer. The person who followed us to the motel was Caleb. The voice outside my apartment came from a Meridian employee Aaron had threatened. The light in the Arizona desert had been created by two people we had never identified. The network appeared supernatural because we imagined one man moving faster than any person could move. In reality, dozens of people had surrounded us, some willing, some afraid, some born into it, others trapped by the first mistake they made while watching someone else. Aaron said we had never been chased by a person. We had been passed from hand to hand. Owen asked where Aaron was. One of the dark screens turned on. The man in the green jacket appeared. He sat in another room facing the camera. He was older now than he had seemed at Miller Ridge, but the face was unmistakable. The gray beard, the deep lines beside his mouth, the eyes that watched without blinking. Aaron said he was close enough to hear us without the speakers. Dane asked why he selected us. Aaron looked toward me. He said he did not select us. My father did. The central screen changed. Old security footage appeared. The date was from 3 weeks before our Miller Ridge trip. My father entered a Meridian storage office under a false name. He accessed the cabin rental database and searched for my information. He found Mara's reservation. He opened it. He stayed on the screen for almost 15 minutes. Then he left. Aaron explained that my father had spent years hiding inside the network, trying to destroy it from within. When he discovered that I was traveling to Miller Ridge, he could have canceled the reservation. He could have warned me. Instead, he allowed the booking to continue. He believed bringing me close to the network would create an opportunity. My father needed someone outside his compromised identity to carry evidence to law enforcement. He used us. The memory card mailed to Mara had been sent by my father. The key to Station 17 had been sent by my father. Several numbered clues were his attempt to expose locations without revealing himself. But Aaron discovered the plan. After that, both sides used the same path. My father left clues. Aaron added traps. My father directed police toward archives. Aaron redirected us toward prepared rooms. We were caught inside a conversation between two men who rarely saw each other. Every door became a message. Every cabin became a move. I looked at my father on the screen. He lowered his head. Aaron was telling the truth, at least part of it. My father had drawn us into the investigation. He may have believed it was necessary. That did not make it easier to accept. My mother shouted through the screen. She told me not to listen. Aaron turned toward her. The video had no delay. He could hear her from wherever he was. He said my mother knew more than she admitted. She had carried messages for my father for years. She changed our names, moved us between homes, destroyed records. She helped him remain dead. She believed she was protecting me. But every time she moved, she confirmed to the network that my father was still active. The original cabin had never closed. It only became quiet. Aaron said my reservation at Miller Ridge gave him a chance to force my father out of hiding. He allowed the incident to escalate. He allowed the police to find the crawl space. He allowed the memory card to reach Mara. He wanted the hidden war to become visible. The network had grown too large for Aaron to control completely. Some viewers acted independently. Some cabin directors ignored instructions. Some used the system for money, others used it for violence. My father believed exposing everything would destroy it. Aaron believed exposure would free it. Once the public learned how easily cameras could be hidden, voices copied, records altered, and official systems compromised, fear would do more work than the network ever could. Millions of people would begin watching each other. The system would no longer need secret rooms. People would build the cabins themselves. Dane said he was insane. Aaron said sanity was only a word used when a pattern became too uncomfortable to accept. Then, the screen showing my parents widened. Behind door 0 was another chamber filled with server racks and physical filing cabinets. Grant stepped closer. He said the system contained the complete archive, names, payments, blackmail records, missing person files, access logs, every member and every victim. The evidence needed to dismantle the network was behind that door. Aaron said my father sealed it 20 years earlier. He built the lock while working with Daniel. It could not be opened with the key alone. A second mechanical release was hidden beneath the wooden chair where my father sat. My father had refused to activate it. Aaron could have killed him. He could have forced my mother, but the archive had been designed to destroy itself if opened under the wrong sequence. Only my father knew the exact process. My father had passed part of that sequence to me when I was a child. I did not remember it. Aaron believed memory remained even when the mind buried it. That was why he built the entire path around doors, numbers, knocks, and chairs. He was trying to recover something my father had hidden inside me. The 3 knocks, 2 short signals and 1 long, the number 17, the repeated chairs, the open doors. They were not random symbols. They were pieces of a sequence. I thought back to the kitchen memory. My father working beneath the sink, the small key in my hand, the green jacket outside. My father telling me some doors were safer when they remained locked. Then another memory surfaced. My father placed my hand against a wooden chair. He tapped the seat 3 times. 2 quickly, 1 slowly. He told me to count backward from the first safe number. I had forgotten the number. Aaron had spent years surrounding me with versions of the memory. Door 17, door 18, cabin 19. He was walking backward through numbers, trying to lead me to 0. Grant said the archive might contain an emergency release system. If we opened it correctly, the records could be transmitted outside the network. If we made a mistake, everything could be erased. Aaron wanted me to complete the sequence. My father wanted the door to remain closed. Collins asked why Aaron had brought the full investigation team into the original cabin. Aaron said because the archive needed witnesses. If only he opened it, the evidence could be dismissed as manipulation. If federal agents, the original builder, his son, and the selected cabin opened it together, the release would become undeniable. He did not care whether he was arrested afterward. The system had already lasted longer than Daniel. It would survive him. My father lifted his head and spoke for the first time. His voice came through the central screen. He said, Aaron was lying about one thing. The archive did not need to be opened to expose the network. My father had already copied it. He spent 20 years transferring pieces into ordinary systems, court records, insurance files, newspaper archives, and private accounts. No single piece made sense. Together, they formed the same map. The key was not behind door 0. The key was Lewis Grant's private drive. Grant looked toward the equipment bag he carried. My father had guided Collins toward Meridian. Collins guided Grant toward the hidden server. The files Grant copied before Meridian was disconnected contained more than false employee accounts. They contained the index needed to assemble the distributed archive. Aaron's expression changed for the first time. He had not known. My father smiled faintly. Then every screen in the chamber went black. Emergency lights activated. A gunshot sounded through the speakers. My mother screamed. The central feed returned. My father had fallen sideways from the chair. Blood spread across his shirt. Aaron stood behind him, holding a handgun. He was not in another distant room. He had been behind door 0. He had used a pre-recorded feed to make us believe he was somewhere else. Aaron aimed the weapon toward my mother. He told me to open the door. Collins fired at the central screen, shattering it. The bullets struck only glass and wiring. The real room remained behind several feet of concrete. Dane searched the chamber walls. Grant examined the cables running from the screens. Mara moved among the wooden chairs, looking toward the ceiling. Owen watched the remaining camera feeds. Aaron began counting backward from 17. Each number echoed through the underground chamber. My father was still moving. He pressed one hand against his chest and reached toward the underside of the chair. My mother tried to help him, but her wrists were restrained. At 15, a red light appeared beneath one of the chairs in our chamber. At 14, another light appeared. At 13, Mara shouted that the chairs were pressure sensors. The network was tracking where we stood. At 12, Owen realized one camera feed did not match our movements. The image showing our chamber was delayed by approximately 4 seconds. At 11, Grant followed a cable beneath the floor. It led toward a narrow maintenance panel, behind the last row of chairs. At 10, Collins pulled the panel open. Behind it was a tunnel. Aaron had built a visible door to control our attention. The real passage was hidden behind the audience. The chairs did not face the archive. They faced away from the entrance. That was what my father had been trying to tell us with every photograph. The chair was not where someone waited. The chair showed which direction not to look. At 9, Collins entered the tunnel. Dane followed. Owen went after them. Mara stayed with Grant and me. At 8, Aaron stopped counting. He had noticed the panel opening through the cameras. The lights failed again. Gunfire erupted inside the tunnel. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Grant pulled the hard drive from his bag and connected it to a port beneath the control console. He said he could begin assembling the distributed archive, but the underground system was blocking all external signals. We needed to open the shield surrounding door 0. Mara examined the broken central screen. Behind it, she found a manual control box. 3 switches, 1 red, 1 black, 1 unmarked. I remembered my father's words. Count backward from the first safe number. The first safe number was not 17. It was 3. 3 of us entered Miller Ridge. 3 knocks. 3 people. The network repeated 3 because Daniel believed groups of 3 created predictable fear. 1 person acted. 1 froze. 1 watched. I turned the switches in reverse order. Unmarked, black, red. The concrete walls vibrated. Metal panels began sliding away from the ceiling. Grant's signal detector came alive. The underground chamber was reconnecting to the outside world. The remaining screens turned on. The 117 viewers returned. Messages filled the display. Some asked what happened. Some ordered the feed restored. Some warned Aaron that federal signals were entering the system. Grant started the archive transfer. The progress bar moved slowly. 1%, 2%, 3%. An alarm sounded. Aaron appeared on one of the screens. He was moving through the archive room, dragging my mother by one arm. My father remained near the chair. He was alive, but barely. Aaron reached a second door at the back of the room, an escape tunnel. Before he could open it, Collins emerged through a side passage and fired. The bullet struck Aaron's shoulder. He released my mother. Dane entered behind Collins. Noah Mercer appeared from behind a server rack and fired toward them. Owen struck Noah from the side with the metal bar. The 2 fell against the floor. Mara and I ran into the tunnel. Grant remained behind, transmitting the archive. The passage opened into the room behind door 0. The air smelled of dust, hot electronics, and gunpowder. My mother crawled toward my father. Aaron lay near the escape door, reaching for his weapon with his uninjured arm. Collins ordered him to stop. Aaron smiled. Then he pressed a button attached to his belt. The server racks began flashing red. Grant shouted through the communication line that the archive room was preparing to destroy itself. The transfer had reached 12%. Dane kicked Aaron's weapon away and handcuffed his good wrist to a floor support. Owen held Noah against the ground while Collins restrained him. Mara reached my parents first. My mother's wrists were bound with plastic ties. Mara cut them using a knife from Collins's medical kit. I knelt beside my father. His eyes opened. For a moment, he looked confused. Then he said, "My name." It was not a recording. It was not a voice copied through a speaker. It was my father. I asked why he never came home. He said he tried once. The network photographed him near our house. The next day, they sent him a picture of me walking to school. He understood that remaining dead was the only protection he could give us. He joined Meridian under false identities. He spent years copying records and sabotaging cabin operations. Sometimes he arrived too late. Sometimes he saved people without them ever knowing they had been selected. Sometimes he could only leave a clue. He said Miller Ridge was supposed to be empty. He had disabled the booking after he saw my name. Aaron restored it. My father tried to reach us on the road, but the network intercepted his message. When he realized we had entered the cabin, he began sending evidence to Collins. The key to Station 17, the account records, the Meridian connections. He never wanted me to follow the numbered doors. Aaron turned his warnings into invitations. I asked whether he sent the photograph from outside the motel. My father nodded. He recovered the camera after Aaron left it in the woods. He mailed the memory card because it showed the green jacket and proved the surveillance continued. He did not know the video would frighten us into investigating further. He thought police would place us under protection. He underestimated how deeply the network had entered the evidence system. The archive transfer reached 20%. The red lights flashed faster. Grant said the underground room would seal in less than 5 minutes. Aaron laughed from the floor. He said the archive was too large to transmit before the destruction sequence completed. My father reached beneath the wooden chair. His fingers found a small metal lever. He told me Daniel built the room with 2 endings. One erased the archive. The other released it. The release required someone to remain inside and hold the mechanical override. The lever could not be locked into place. The person holding it would be trapped when the blast doors closed. I told him we would find another way. He said he had spent 20 years looking for one. There was none. My mother told him not to do it. He looked at her. The expression on his face carried an entire life they had never been allowed to share. He apologized, not only for leaving, for making her carry the truth alone, for allowing me to believe he was dead, for turning protection into another kind of absence. My mother took his hand. She said she had already forgiven him years ago. The transfer reached 28%. The first blast door began closing over the tunnel we used to enter. Collins ordered everyone to move. Noah struggled against Owen. Aaron remained calm. He said my father would never hold the lever. He had spent his life hiding behind other people. My father looked toward him. Then he pulled the override. Every server in the room activated. The progress bar jumped. 30%, 40, 50. The live feeds across the network changed. Instead of cabins, the screens displayed names, addresses, payments, messages, photographs of operators installing cameras, videos of threats, records of missing people. The viewers began disconnecting. Some sent frantic messages. Others begged for instructions. Grant routed copies toward federal servers, state police systems, international agencies, newspapers, and private attorneys whose contact information my father had stored. The network had relied on secrecy. Now every observer could see the people observing them. Cabin directors saw their own homes. Blackmailed officers saw the evidence held against them. Victims saw the names of watchers. Watchers saw the names of those above them. The chain began breaking from every direction. Aaron stopped smiling. He begged Noah to reach the override. Noah could not move beneath Owen's weight. The transfer reached 70%. The blast door was halfway closed. Collins dragged Aaron toward the tunnel. Aaron resisted. He said he would not leave door 0. Dane told him he was under arrest. He looked toward the archive and said there was no arrest outside the cabin, only another room. Collins pulled harder. Aaron twisted free and threw himself toward my father. I stepped between them. Aaron struck me across the face with the handcuff attached to his wrist. I fell against the chair. He reached for the override. My father held it down. Aaron wrapped his hand around my father's injured shoulder and pulled. My father cried out, but did not release the lever. I grabbed Aaron from behind. For years, he had existed in recordings, photographs, distant lights, copied voices, and glimpses through windows. In that moment, he was only an old man, strong for his age, desperate, bleeding, human. Owen helped me pull him away. Collins forced Aaron toward the closing tunnel. The transfer reached 87%. My father's breathing became shallow. I told him to release the lever and come with us. He said, "The final part of the archive contained the identities of children taken into the network. If the transfer stopped, families would never know what happened. He would not leave them inside." My mother refused to move. Mara held her. The blast door dropped lower. Grant shouted that we had less than 1 minute. My father looked at me. He told me the network survived because every person believed opening one more door would finally give them control. He said I needed to do what he could not, walk away before the next door appeared. I asked him to come with us. He smiled. He said he had already spent too much of his life in hidden rooms. The transfer reached 94%. Collins pulled me toward the tunnel. My mother screamed my father's name. He held the lever. The last thing I saw before the blast door closed was my father sitting in the wooden chair. Behind him, the screens displayed hundreds of cabins going dark. The tunnel sealed. A deep explosion moved through the ground. The force threw us against the walls. Oh! Dust filled the passage. Emergency lights failed. For several seconds I heard nothing. Then sound returned, as a high, ringing tone. We crawled toward the stairwell. The underground structure collapsed behind us, section by section. Concrete cracked, metal twisted. Heat moved through the tunnel. Dane and Collins dragged Aaron. Owen and Mara carried Noah between them. My mother walked beside me, holding my arm. We reached the basement as the floor beneath the hidden door began to sink. The tactical teams outside had regained communication when Grant released the archive. They entered the house and pulled us toward the front entrance. We reached the yard seconds before the porch dropped several inches into the ground. A column of dust burst through the basement windows. Part of the roof collapsed. The original cabin disappeared beneath the house. My father did not come out. For 3 days, emergency crews searched the remains. The underground chamber had collapsed completely. They found sections of server equipment, filing cabinets, burned photographs, and pieces of the wooden chairs. They found my father near the mechanical override. His hand remained around the lever. He had held it until the end. The transfer reached 100%. The destruction of Door Zero did not erase the archive. It released it. Within hours, law enforcement agencies across the country received thousands of files. Some departments initially tried to suppress them. That became impossible. My father had sent copies to journalists, courts, victim advocacy groups, and relatives of missing people. Meridian Archive Services was raided in 6 states. Its executives were arrested. Several claimed they had no knowledge of the hidden network. Some were telling the truth. Others had directed cabins for years. Patrick Sloan entered witness protection after providing passwords and internal records. Special Agent Dane led a new investigation that operated outside the compromised evidence system. More than 200 people were arrested during the first month. Police officers, private investigators, security contractors, rental property owners, technology workers, former forestry employees, ordinary people who had once watched a feed and later agreed to install a camera to keep their own names hidden. Some had committed no violence. Others were connected to disappearances spanning decades. The archive revealed the location of hidden rooms, tunnels, storage sites, and burial grounds. Families who had waited 20 or 30 years finally learned what happened to people they loved. Russell's remains were returned to Carroll. The Mercer parents were found beneath an abandoned fire road in West Virginia. Daniel Vale's notebooks confirmed that he ordered their deaths after they discovered cameras near a campsite. Caleb and Noah had been taken afterward. Daniel raised them inside the network. That history explained what they became. It did not excuse it. Noah was convicted of kidnapping, attempted murder, unlawful surveillance, and conspiracy. Caleb was found 6 weeks after Door Zero collapsed. He had been hiding inside a Meridian storage facility in Missouri. He surrendered when police displayed files proving the network had recorded him since childhood. Even Caleb had been a cabin. Aaron Vale survived the collapse. Collins pulled him from Door Zero against his will. He spent the rest of his life in federal custody. He refused to identify himself as Aaron. During interviews, he used different names: Daniel, Noah, Collins, Ethan. He claimed a name belonged to whoever controlled the room. Psychiatrists described him as intelligent, manipulative, and deeply committed to the belief system created by his father. He never expressed regret. When asked why he watched strangers, he said people were most honest when they believed they were alone. When asked how many cabins remained undiscovered, he smiled. Then he asked whether the interviewer had checked beneath his own house. Aaron died 2 years later from complications related to untreated cancer. No one came to claim his body. Some investigators believed his death ended the original Vale leadership. Others believed the role had already moved to someone else. The online viewing network collapsed after the archive release. Many users deleted accounts and destroyed equipment. Grant preserved enough data to identify most of them. Some viewers contacted police voluntarily. They said they entered the network through anonymous links, believing the videos were staged. By the time they understood the people were real, the system had already collected their faces, addresses, and online histories. They were told to continue watching. Then, they were told to vote. Then they were given small tasks. Send an envelope. Park a vehicle. Place a speaker. Report when someone left home. Each task seemed harmless when separated from the others. Together, they created the illusion of a man who could appear anywhere. The network's greatest weapon had never been technology. It was shared responsibility. No one person felt responsible for the entire act. One person watched, another recorded, another delivered, another lied, another opened the door. My mother and I buried my father beneath his real name. The funeral was small. Collins attended with his wife. He had officially returned from the dead after the body in his vehicle was identified as a Meridian security contractor. The contractor had been killed earlier and used to stage Collins's death. Collins eventually left police work. He said he had spent too many years entering rooms after people had already suffered inside them. He and his wife moved somewhere he never told us. For once, I did not ask for the address. Agent Dane remained with the investigation until the final Meridian trial ended. Lewis Grant created a non-profit organization that helped renters and homeowners inspect properties for illegal surveillance. He refused to use the word cabin. Owen stayed in Arizona, but he sold the house with the tunnel beneath it. The structure was demolished before another owner moved in. He bought a smaller home closer to town. It had no crawl space. He still watched his security cameras, but not every minute. Mara returned to photography. She no longer photographed isolated landscapes. She photographed people who survived the network, families, investigators, former victims. Empty rooms after hidden cameras were removed. Her most famous photograph showed a wooden chair sitting outside in direct sunlight. No walls, no floor above it, no darkness beneath it. She called the photograph, "Nothing Behind You." My mother moved near me. For the first year, we spoke almost every day. There were moments when I felt angry with her. She had hidden the truth. She allowed me to mourn a man who was alive. She watched me walk toward Miller Ridge without telling me that my childhood had been connected to Daniel Vale. But anger became complicated when I understood the choices she faced. If she told me I might search for my father, if I searched, the network might follow. Silence had not protected us forever, but it had given me 20 years of ordinary life. I eventually bought a house, not an apartment, not a cabin, a small brick home on a busy street near a school. Before signing anything, I hired Grant's organization to inspect it. They checked the foundation, the attic, the walls, the smoke detectors, the electrical outlets, the vents, the yard. They found nothing. For the first few months, I still checked. I listened near the walls before sleeping. I watched reflections in dark windows. Whenever the heating system clicked, I held my breath. Fear does not disappear when the danger ends. It becomes a habit. Habits take longer to remove than cameras. 1 year after my father's funeral, a package arrived on my porch. There was no return address. The box was small enough to hold in one hand. My name had been written across the top. I stood over it for several minutes. Every part of me wanted to carry it inside, open it carefully, photograph the contents, search for fingerprints, find out who sent it. That was how every path had started. An envelope, a photograph, a key, a question, one more clue promising an answer behind the next door. I called the police. The bomb squad examined the package. There were no explosives, no electronics, no harmful substances. They asked whether I wanted them to open it. I looked at the box through the protective container. Then I remembered my father inside door 0. He told me to walk away before the next door appeared. I told the officers to destroy it unopened. They seemed surprised. One asked whether I was sure. I said yes. The package was burned. I never learned what it contained. Maybe it was a final message from a surviving network member. Maybe it was a copycat trying to frighten me. Maybe it contained nothing but an empty chair photographed from another room. For a long time, not knowing would have been impossible. Now it felt like freedom. That evening, I sat alone in my living room. Cars passed outside. Children shouted in the distance. A dog barked from a neighboring yard. Ordinary noise filled the house. Then someone knocked on my front door 3 times. I froze. The first knock was followed quickly by the second. The third came after a longer pause. 2 short, 1 long. The old pattern. I did not approach the door. I did not ask who was there. I checked the camera. An elderly man stood on the porch holding a small brown dog. I recognized him as a neighbor from 2 houses away. The dog had escaped his yard. He wanted to know whether I had seen it earlier. Nothing was wrong. No one was hiding. There was no green jacket, no speaker beneath the floor, no camera in the trees. I opened the door and helped him return the dog home. When I came back, I stood on my porch for several minutes. The street remained bright beneath the lamps. Windows glowed along both sides. People moved inside their homes, visible through curtains and open blinds. Once, that sight would have frightened me. So many lives exposed. So many people believing they were alone. But watching is not always ownership. Seeing is not always control. The difference is choice. Daniel Vale stole that choice. Aaron built an empire around stealing it. My father died returning it. I still lock my doors. I still check strange sounds. I still avoid remote cabins and rentals with floor hatches. I do not believe fear can be completely unlearned, but I no longer follow every clue left in front of me. I no longer believe every unanswered question deserves an answer. Some doors protect nothing. Some doors hide only another hallway. And some doors remain powerful only because you keep standing in front of them. Door 0 was buried beneath the house when the foundation collapsed. Station 17 was sealed. Miller Ridge was demolished. The church archive was emptied. The Nevada facility was filled with concrete. Meridian was dismantled. The known cabins went dark one by one. Maybe a hidden camera still remains somewhere. Maybe someone still uses Aaron's name. Maybe another person is sitting in front of a screen, waiting for a stranger to enter an empty room. I cannot control that. What I can control is whether I become part of it again. The final door Aaron placed in front of me was not made of metal. It had no lock, no number, no hidden camera. It was the need to know whether the story was truly over. For years I stood in front of that door, listening, waiting, expecting 3 knocks from the other side. Then one morning, I understood something my father had tried to teach me when I was a child. A closed door is not always a mystery. Sometimes it is simply closed, and the only way to end the story is to stop opening it.